You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 567, where tonight we're going to break down the final episode of Season 1 of The Acolyte, an episode aptly titled The Acolyte. And for obvious reasons, because we finally have a full-fledged Acolyte in our presence, and it was a very entertaining episode for me. Lots of things I liked. I think there's some things that we'll talk about that I was kind of like, yeah, I could take it or leave it. But overall, we'll talk about our kind of overall feelings for the show too. But I'm ready for season 2. Like you had me at Plagueis, honestly, at this, just to be completely transparent. But there's so many other things that weren't answered, and some answers we did get, but there were a lot of things that we didn't get answers to that I'm highly anticipating to see in season 2, because it kind of got even more messier than before. And I think that was part of it, but we'll get into that here in just a little bit. And first, let me bring on Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, it's good to kind of see the whole season now and be able to judge the whole season and talk about it. And we'll just stick to the last episode tonight. But when we come back later this weekend, we'll do a full one. But I'm with you. I think it kind of stuck the landing for the most part. Some of the things that plagued the series throughout it still were present there. A lot of open-ended questions, so we'll have to see how we feel about that. But it should be a fun night, though.
Yeah, I mean, the unanswered questions are just, it's chumming the waters for a show like us, because it gives us a lot of material to really talk about and theorize and speculate over the next few weeks on. So I'm not really upset by that, but it's kind of cool that we at least have that in our wheelhouse here and realm. And join us. I don't know that she's been on since like the first couple of episodes, but Lauren's back to finally break down. You've seen all episodes at this point, right, Lauren? You've seen all of them now?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
I have.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. How are you doing?
I'm good. I feel like last time I was on the show talking about Acolyte, we were living in a completely different world.
I think we were, yeah.
Yeah, we were living in a very different world. So it's gonna be interesting conversation, that's for sure.
Yep, I know. We're gonna get to much of that. Before we get into, just let me give a quick program. I'm going to just kind of go out of sequence here. But on that note, this Sunday, we are going to bring in Ed and Fred. So there'll be a panel of us, kind of a roundtable discussion, talking about the full season. And so we'll get into some of the things we liked, didn't like, really have some fun questions out there about the series in general. That'll be at 8 p.m. Central on Sunday night. That is going to be a public show. It will not be a Patreon show. So everybody's welcome to join. Feel free to bring any questions that you got as well. And that'll also be the night that we announce the final winner of our Acolyte contest. So each week we've been giving away an Acolyte poster for anybody that submits a question for us to ask on air. This Sunday, we will give the big finale prize away, which is going to be the Art of the High Republic book. And we showed it earlier. I don't have it really available to me right now, but we'll mail you that book. All you got to do is submit a question between now and Sunday's show. So Jonesy, I know you've got some thank yous that you want to share with some of the folks that are with us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Our fantastic Patreon members, especially our now part of the tribe members: Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike Borda, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. And then, of course, our Delusions Greater members. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Daz. If you're curious about Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon, like what we're saying, usually on Sunday evenings, we'll have a normal Patreon show. We'll do a little deeper dive into kind of whatever the hot topic is of the week, or something special if we're in between, series and things like that. So it's always kind of a fun thing. Sometimes we do a little Tatooine trading post, fun collectibles that we have. So it's usually a good time. We hope anybody listening to the show would like to go check that out, cantinacast.com/Patreon. Of course, all of our amazing people already in the live stream tonight, cantinacast.com/YouTube. If you're listening to this, we'd love to have you come out and see all of our smiling faces and join in the chat like these amazing people: Music Train Sky, Alex, J Knife, Chris, I won't pronounce your last name, but Chris, Danny K, One Up versus CPU. I think if there's anybody else I missed in there, we'll get you there at the end. But thanks everyone for coming out.
Jovanovich,
there we go.
I think is the pronunciation there.
I practiced it before, when I wrote them down, I was practicing it, and then it just completely went out the window.
It was unfair. I had time to look at it and go, Jovanovich. Thanks everybody for being here. Feel free to throw questions in the chat tonight, as Jonesy mentioned. So if you've got anything that pops up, throw it in there. We'll try to answer it. If we don't get to it immediately, it's likely because we're tabling that and we kind of get to that discussion session, we'll kind of hopefully bring it back. If we don't, speak up. Like so there's so many questions that kind of come in and comments that it tends to get buried at times. So let's see what else. And if you're new here, thanks for joining. Thanks for the view. Thanks for the download. We certainly appreciate all that support. Please like, subscribe to the channel. As Jonesy mentioned, and comment down below. The questions we'll pull questions from the comments as well and make you eligible to win the Art of the High Republic book on Sunday. So, okay, I think
giveaway from last week's question.
Oh yeah,
so.
We've got a winner for this poster right here. It's the last one that we've got. So
yeah, last poster, and again we'll do the book next week. But this week, Zor Allens was our winner from YouTube. So Zor Allens, don't see in the chat quite yet. But if you'll reach out to us, sending us an email to hello@cantinacast.com, and we will get you all set up and we'll get that mailed over to you as soon as possible. So
awesome.
Congratulations, Rollins.
Yeah, congratulations. All right. With that, let's get into opening thoughts about this episode. I know it's hard to talk about. Like I was thinking about this. I'm like, man, there's so many things I want to say about this series as a whole, especially since we're at the final episode. But I'm going to try my best, and I hope we can all do our best to really stay focused on the episode. But I imagine that conversation is going to naturally.
Are you talking to us or talking to yourself?
Yeah, all of us.
Just wondering.
Okay,
yeah, so to peel back the curtain a little bit, I think last time Laura was on the show, Albert sent a text like, "Hey, let's just keep it to these 3 things before the show." It's really more for me than y'all, but still.
Yeah, right. I do this. I know you guys are just a big front, honestly, for some of this. But Jonesy, I'll start with you. What did you think about the episode? What was the highs, the lows? What worked for you? What didn't?
Yeah, I think there were some definite highs. And again, I think overall it stuck the landing for where the show needed to go. It did wrap up the major story arc.
Which is what we were hoping it would do. Which
we knew it would do. They told us this would be the case, right? So Leslie Headland, was very clear about this. I would argue it probably didn't wrap up enough of the big ones. I think from an overall standpoint, it's probably one of the harsher criticisms. But man, we got some really cool things in here. Again, more great Jedi lightsaber fights. We had Bleeding the Crystal, which we had talked about in our hype episode, I believe, and we kind of threw it out there about whether it was possible. We saw it. Other side of that is execution was maybe a little light because they didn't have the time to go into it, I think was more the reason behind that. But it was really cool to see it, though. Live action, pretty stellar. Of course, we get the Plagueis cameo. We get the Yoda cameo. We're doing spoilers if you're not aware. But anyway, so a lot of those good moments there. I think some of the criticisms, I think Osha and May still kind of fell flat for me a little bit. I think the way that Soul was killed, I think, again, I have some questions there that we could probably explore and talk more about. Where Chimere fits in, I think, is an interesting debate. We had talked about last week whether he was actually the Sith apprentice. Now I'm kind of wondering if that's the case at all. And so we're kind of back to square one with some things. I wasn't quite prepared for it to be such an open-ended ending going into season 2. So, but a lot more thoughts we'll get into throughout the show, but I don't want to take everybody else's items.
Yeah. No, thanks. And I'm with you on that. Like, it feels like, yes, she kept her word. We got kind of the big boulder items out of the way, at least wrapped up. You may not agree or like the way they were wrapped up, but nonetheless, I think they're pretty close-ended at this point. But at the same time, there was so much that was open. And a lot of that plays into, making sure that this is, primed and in the blocks, if you will, for a season 2, right? It's very easy to greenlight this now at this point, knowing where we could possibly go with all the open-ended stuff. So some of that is intentional, but for us as watchers and viewers, it does leave a lot of questions in our head and wondering, scratching our heads, I guess.
Right. One last point is, again, we talked a little bit about this on the Patreon show this last week. We have to believe what they're telling us they're going to do because that's what they do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We always speculate. It's a lot of fun to speculate and go on these tangents and everything, but at the end of the day, it's usually pretty simple. And that was exactly what happened when they telegraphed that Soul was going to be the fall guy. Sure enough, we said that's probably going to be it. And sure enough, that's what we got. So some things are never as complicated as we would like them to be. I think even though we could certainly derive other meanings and more in-depth stuff from that too, which again makes it fun. But at the end of the day, does that get you a little out of control with some of your expectations too?
Yep. Okay, Lauren, I'm going to dedicate at least 20 minutes now for you to tell us how you feel about Soul's death. Go.
That took way too long. Like,
the suffering?
we did not need the
Yeah.
shot to last as long as it did on him choking and dying. That was horrible.
It was 1 second for every year that passed.
Oh my God. Yeah. So so my thoughts, I agree with a lot of what Jonesy said. I do appreciate that they did wrap up the main arc. I think that was good. I thought it was very fitting how the way that they ended it was Vernestra making the same mistake that was already made, that tied in really well with the hubris theme that we've been working with this whole season. So I thought that was a very fitting note to end on. And of course the lightsaber duels are really cool too. I always appreciate anytime we get to see some cool lightsaber tricks. So that was fun.
Yeah.
But I mean, with this episode, I did kind of find myself still feeling like character behavior was kind of erratic and unpredictable. And I mean unpredictable in a bad way. Like, I don't expect that I need to know exactly what the character is going to do in every situation, but I do expect there to be some sort of general sort of trend of how we can expect a character to behave. And in this episode, I felt like I found myself being surprised by the way that some of the characters were behaving.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like probably my main hang up, and that's been my hang up for a lot of the season too. And I would have liked more of an explanation about what Soul meant about the virgins and how exactly they're one person, how exactly the mother created them through the Force. So I don't expect all questions to be answered by the end of season 1, but I would have liked that one to be answered. So maybe we'll find that out later on, though.
Yeah. No, I think that's all fair, and I think that's a very respectful criticism of the series. I mean, we've been much to, I think, disagreement of some folks out there. We've not been like, oh my God, this is the best series ever. This is the best episode ever. I mean, I think our expectations have been tempered, have been tempered, I should say. But I think it's fair criticism. Like some of the character motivations, and I went on I wouldn't say a soapbox, but I think I talked about this when we broke down episode 3 and episode 7. Some of the direction, character direction itself, like where they made like those decision points, I was really kind of struggling with, I guess I would say. And some of that came out in this episode, and it certainly spilled over, I think, into the Vernestra Rose stuff. Although you'd make a good point about just kind of, history repeating itself in some ways there. But I think overall, I enjoyed the episode. Like, it's hard to walk away from the series and go, yeah, I would never watch that again. I would watch this again. There's a lot of stuff in here to mine. If you're really into like the Jedi, the Sith aspects of it, they kind of gave us some of that. There's a lot of it has been put in front of us to, make assumptions about, and we don't have the details. And I think that's where that frustrating part is it's almost too wide open on some of these things. And so it kind of leads us to, go astray in terms of, is it good? Is it bad? Did they give us enough? Did they really have a coherent, full kind of story planned out? I think the short answer is yes, but it didn't really necessarily come out in the episodes as clear or as evident as we wanted it to be. Now, here's what I would say just quickly on, I guess, the pros and cons of this episode. Again, I'm with y'all. The lightsaber battles, I loved all of that stuff. They gave us more slow motion. There was a Matrix Reloaded 2 shot that was almost like frame for frame, shot for shot that they gave us at one point. All of the cameos with Plagueis and Yoda. I mean, those were pretty much a lock-in to ensure that we get a season 2. Because why would you throw those 2 characters in there and not pay that off at some point? The bleeding of the crystal was something I had in mind. I like the different take on the bleeding of the crystal. We've only seen it historically, outside of Jedi Order, but we've seen it where, they're grabbing the crystal and they're experiencing all this stuff. We got to see it. She did this while it was still in the hilt. And then after it was ignited, that was pretty exciting to see. I think a lot of people probably that are watching this show who have never read the comics and don't know the history of red lightsabers, it was just there, right, for Sith to use. I think they probably are scratching their head a little bit and going like, what the heck was really all that about? We know that there's an emotional thing that's happening in the background in order for that crystal to change, and it's very traumatic for that person. But to the average listener watcher, I don't know that they necessarily caught that. Maybe they don't have to, but it's something that for us that do know made it more special. So I did enjoy that. I didn't really like the way Soul went at the very end. Honestly, I wanted more for that guy. It is tragic, and I do appreciate tragedy. So I'm not going to say I hated it. We talked about this in the last episode about, we were okay with a lot of the things that would potentially happen. If they did happen, we would be okay with it. We're not going to say this is a bad series. We're not going to say it's bad writing. It just didn't turn out the way we wanted it. But that was one that I was really kind of like, man, I don't know how I feel about Soul because he was such a good character. But, I don't know if... Again, it goes back to the character decisions that they made more than anything. So let's keep moving on. I don't want to turn this into 30 minutes of us just kind of bashing the series, and that's not what we're trying to do here. We're actually, I think, when we get through the breakdown of stuff, we are going to ask some very legitimate questions about some things, about some of the stuff where it could go potentially, and I think we're going to touch on more things that we really did enjoy. So
yeah, we really jumped off to a really hot start on this episode too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good point. So let's segue into kind of the helmet, because we left off there. I wasn't expecting to pick up there, to be honest, but
I'm glad they did. It worked really well that way.
Well, and then to see him put that, she's struggling with the helmet, and Kamir is sitting there trying to help remove the helmet, and suddenly he's getting possessed. And the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh my gosh, she's channeling, whether subconsciously or not. She seems to be channeling some of the power that she's acquired from her mother, and he's now being possessed or overtaken. And then I thought, well, crap, what if this helmet is actually possessed? We've been talking about this way before the series even started during our final hype episode. And I don't know which one I like more, whether it was, just kind of the force naturally coming out, being in that kind of deprivation tank that she's in, just her and the force, and that's the natural dark side was coming out, or is it some kind of Sith artifact or cursed or possessed helmet that we've been talking about? Jonesy, I guess if you had to pick one or the other, how were you interpreting that scene?
This is tough. I thought maybe Mother Coral was finally going to we were finally get some sort of resolution or reemergence of her, because this is another character that still just disappeared and we have nothing, right? Because I was with you. It's like I hadn't invested a whole lot, and this had come up in some of our Q&As, where is the helmet possessed? Do we want to go the Momin route or some of the other Sith character routes? And it didn't really feel like it was going that way. And this moment felt like it kind of leaned into the way, but I viewed it more as what Chimere was saying the previous episode, or 2 episodes, I guess, really, of it's a, like you were saying, it's a deprivation thing. It's just you and the Force. And as your panic rises, and as her panic rises, and her emotions start to heighten, that starts to come out in other ways that you're not expecting. And again, her power is reemerging, I think, throughout the last couple of episodes, notwithstanding the last flashback, but it's starting to reemerge, and so that it comes out in a way that's a bit uncontrollable. And even he is having a difficult time pushing through some of that was unexpected, and it's much stronger than maybe he realized. Makes a lot of sense, I think, in this case, because we've seen this with other characters too, when they finally start to open up, but they don't have any way of controlling it, and it's just coming out, and the helmet is just kind of a conduit for it, but maybe not the exact source of it, because then there were no other indications. There were no voices. There were no other weird actions or anything like that was happening to Osha. So I'm more that it was just her and the Force, and it just overwhelmed her, and it just kind of erupted around her.
Yeah. So Lauren, I'm going to ask you a question here. I was thinking about this a little bit more, but if let's just say I'm Plagueis, right? And I'm in the cave, and I'm just kind of keeping a watchful eye, and I think he knows he's there, honestly. There have been people talking about whether or not he actually knows he lives there. I don't know how he would get around that. That'd be weird to have like a roommate like that. But let's just say
some guy,
some random dude, just rando walking around. But let's just say I'm Plagueis, and I'm seeing Osha displaying power that Kamir doesn't have here. And then later on, he gets wind that she was able to force choke, because it sounded like Kamir couldn't do something like that, right? But she was able to force choke. Would you consider then that maybe Plagueis is looking at this as like, that Kamir guy is kind of not as good as he was. He's a liability. Do you think that's what they were trying to maybe, display here?
I mean, I think that is very likely, because that's exactly what I was thinking. So I could see Plagueis having the same thought of, what is this guy doing? Because he doesn't seem very consistent. So yeah, I mean, and also though, I mean, the other thing too, though, is, wouldn't Plagueis be concerned if there is somebody around who could go head to head with him? I mean, if Osha, if Osha is more powerful than Kamir, and she's able to overpower him, then couldn't she also at some point challenge Plagueis? And wouldn't that be against what Plagueis wants? So I'm not sure like what he's going to do with that. Like it seems like he wouldn't want either one of them around.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably in the best interest of the Sith. It certainly behooves him to have the strongest person available, even if it's a risk to him later in life, right? That in his mind, it probably never could happen, although it's likely there'll be an attempt to happen. But yeah, for the betterment of the Sith, yeah, you definitely want the most powerful people. And I can see where maybe in a potentially season 2, he's looking at this and going, yeah. I mean, it kind of turns the whole rule of 2 on its head, because now you have a Sith Lord going, I'm done with this. Well, maybe not. You think about it. I mean, Palpatine did the same thing, right? He was going after Anakin. So what do you think, Jonesy?
Well, the question I have for you, Albert, maybe to turn around on you, is do you like what capacity is Plagueis there for? Like, what is he actually there to do? Is he spying on Chimera? Is he actually aligned with Chimera? Like, what's his actual purpose for being there? Or is he aware of something now that he's exploring? I think also we could probably confirm this probably is Baldemnik, by the way, the planet.
Based on what?
Based on Plagueis showing up, because I wanted that way.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, I think it's honestly, I don't know that I made the roommate comment a minute ago, and I was trying to be funny, but at the same time, I don't think he's living on this planet or in this cave, right? It was the same exact cave they were just in. Right. So Chimera is likely aware that he's there. I don't think he's trying to be transparent about it, or I think they're trying to. I don't think he's trying to necessarily hide that he's not there. I don't think he was ready to tell her, but at some point that probably will come out. I have a hard time getting on board with they don't know he's there and he's kind of hiding around in the shadows, if you will, on the planet. I don't know. There's a lot of explanation that probably needs to go in there. I mean, it is true to the Plagueis that we see in the Plagueis novel. He is almost literally hiding in the shadows throughout most of that book. So that certainly aligns. But I mean, for a 3-second cameo, it's hard to really speculate on exactly why he's here.
We'll save 2 hours for it here in a couple Friday, or a couple weeks for Patreon.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to Osha's vision. And this is where, of course, while she's in helmet, she's seeing that May is killing her. Doesn't she? Of course, this turns out to be her that's holding the lightsaber and killing what's his name, Sol. And this is Chimera says, hey, this is her trying to kill somebody without a weapon. I want to jump to that just really quick on this topic, because this is a hot topic. A lot of people are talking about this as well. But are we seeing the birth or the origin of a force choke, or is this, which I don't think is the case. I've seen a lot of debate about this and people really trashing it and saying, oh my God, they're trying to explain how the force choke was created. I don't necessarily think that was the case. I think that's just one of the things that as a dark side user, when your power elevates to a certain level, that becomes kind of a natural thing that you start to, do or whatever. And she was at that. I think it was a demonstration of power that she didn't even know she had. But I didn't necessarily take it as some kind of force choke origin by any means. Either one of you think that, or want to add any comments on that?
I agree. I think it's just that they were looking at her in surprise like that because they were surprised that she could do it. I don't think they were surprised because it was the first time anybody has ever done this. I feel like force choke must have been around for longer than that.
Yes, I would agree. All right.
Yeah, without question.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. We'll move on. All right. So they make a deal. And this is where Osha tells Chimera that, she knows where May is at, May is at. This is so confusing at times between Osha and May. She knows where May is at, and she's, as long as he's allowed, if he's willing to take her on the ship, then they can, she'll let him know where they're going. So it's basically a race to who can find her first. Okay.
I have a question for
you. Yeah.
So originally, this is something that I'm not piecing together. So originally, at this point in the episode, it sounded like Osha wanted to stop May from killing Sol, and Chimera seems willing to assist her with this.
Yeah.
Why? Like, is there a reason for why he would do that when earlier he had wanted May to kill Sol?
Yeah, if you're talking about, I don't know if it's this scene. I think it's a little bit later when they actually they take off. When he says, this is your last chance kind of thing. Is that the scene you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I I interpreted this as, look, either join me now or we're going to go through something that's going to kind of force you, no pun intended. Your hand's going to be forced to joining the dark side. I think he kind of knew this was inevitable, especially once he found out, or once she found out that Soul was behind a lot of this stuff. That was my take or interpretation. Jonesy, what about you?
Oh man, yeah, I guess that's probably as good as any. I think it was also just, I think his exploring of whether, again, I think it was the comment later that makes some more sense to me, like comparing her, like Osha with May, and saying, you know, May just jumped at the opportunity to be able to do this without even thinking about it, about who she was and about what it meant. She was so hell bent on revenge. She didn't have to channel all of this stuff. And I think Chimere probably had an idea that those things had to fester and that she kept repressing all of that. And at some point it was going to erupt and it make her a stronger apprentice in the long run. And so I think some of it was a bit of a test.
Yeah, probably. I think it was too.
Because I think he may have probably interpreted her vision. Well, let's talk about the vision, because I think we kind of left off there. Is how does Chimere interpret that? Does he look like maybe Maze now has a second chance at redemption? Like, okay, maybe she is capable. Or do you really think that Chimere views it as Osha seeing herself being able to do it? Or can anybody really tell the difference?
Yeah.
I have a very hard time reading him and what he actually thinks.
Yeah, and that's probably fair. That's probably within character, I would think. But the way his face looked and how, I don't know, hopeful he looked when she said that, when she's talking about the vision, and then later on, he says it's a race, first person to get to her first. I interpret that as like, I'm going after her now. Like, she's got it. We just got to get there kind of thing. So, yeah, I think he was kind of maybe rethinking this idea of whether or not Osha would, because Osha had already turned him down, you know, like, you know, you're not like your sister. So maybe I'm wrong here. He wants an acolyte. I think he's pretty desperate, and either one of them probably makes a good candidate. It's just a matter of who wants it more. I mean, she's, you know, that might have been what he was when he told Osha she didn't, what was it? She didn't have what it took, or she wouldn't go all the way kind of thing. I think that in itself is probably that vision is more of what he was looking for initially.
Right. Yeah. And Coops made a comment in the chat that, you know, why wouldn't Chimere just leave Osha? It said they become besties and go find May. Again, he doesn't know where she's at. Right. So that's the card that Osha has to play, is that he doesn't know where they would go back to Brendock. Now, could he probably have deduced that and figured it out at some point? Possibly, but would it have been time wasted. I don't think that he didn't have that information. So I think that's why he needed Osha, and he's willing to play along. And again, some of it, maybe Albert was saying too, is you just got to see this play out and see which way the chips fall, right? Because Chimere still wants an apprentice. He still wants an acolyte, a pupil. And so these are two of his best bets. Which one is going to be the one that emerges?
Yeah.
I will say I would appreciate if we could have some sort of indication. Maybe we'll get this in season 2 of what Chimere actually thinks and what is an act, because for me, it just feels a little bit late for me to not know like what this guy wants. So I'm hoping that that's coming soon, because I feel like that would answer these questions of why is he behaving this way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, more on that here in a little bit, because I do have questions about what exactly he was trying to do. All right. So we get back. I posted this on social media earlier yesterday morning about, gosh, I really don't know if Soul's going to untie her, honestly, because if I were Soul, I wouldn't. There's too much going on here. And I think we definitely saw that. I don't think he had any intentions, of course. She was still tied up. He says he's going to contact Vern. And then Soul mentions that there's a Virgins on the planet. And we'll come back to the Virgins, because I still have a lot of questions, of course, around that and what exactly, how that would exonerate him, or, you know, be kind of any kind of evidence as to what was going on Brendock, especially with the twins creation. But you know, we get the back and forth here where May's talking about, you know, whether or not Soul was trying to justify killing her mom. And then Soul regrets that I think he says his biggest regret in life was the fact that he didn't have an opportunity to save them both. And I believe him. Like, I do feel like sincerely, this was a character that made some bad choices. He's not a bad person. Even at the very end, when we saw him, he's just being selfish, and he is kind of still following into that same pattern of, I mean, he almost got the words out, "I love you," right? And he was killed right before that, or he started becoming force choke. So he does say something now. Let's get into this discussion. He tells her, "You guys are not twins. You're not sisters." So we talked in the last episode. I know Utuni's not here yet. If he's not, he will make himself known here in just a little bit. We talked about whether or not they were clones, and we kind of chalked it up to it's like, well, it depends on what your definition of a clone is. Are we talking about in the sense of clones as they were created during the Clone Wars, or is this some kind of like carbon copy done naturally through the organic force? This feels like that's what that is, the second part, right? I don't know. It wasn't done in a lab, but I think what they're trying to hint at is we have two identical people with the same midichlorian count, the same, what was the other thing, the other term they use when they're talking about that? Symbiote, right?
Yeah,
or symbiotes or whatever.
Symbiont, yeah.
Symbionts. So to me, it was like, okay, everything's identical in every way. Their personalities, of course, are different, but biologically, they are the exact same person. And I think when he's talking about, look, I need evidence, I think at some point what he was thinking is if I can bring both of them in and they can do this testing, they can do this analysis, there can be no other explanation as to how this would have happened unless, one, there was a convergence in the force, or vergence in the force, and there were people that had the ability and the powers to create life. And later on, he alludes to just how powerful that is and what potentially that could mean. So I think that's kind of where he was going. But how did you guys feel about the explanation of the being the same person? And then, are you subscribing now to biological clones, Lauren?
Definitely biological clones. I think that has to be what it is, in my opinion. It sounds like that's where it's going. I wish that we could have gotten a confirmation, though, because it seems like one of those. And usually I don't need my hand to be held. I don't need to be told every little single thing. But this would have been nice. So I'm hoping that we get that soon, because when he said she used the force to create you, I'm kind of like, but how? How did she use the force to create you? So I'm still wondering about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's probably still a lingering. This feels like our conversations around prophecy as well, right? They're always you get enough information to think you can make a logical conclusion, but when you think about it, you still don't have enough to really get yourself all the way there. And there's always something, because I still think there's at least a lingering, a little lingering doubt around whether she actually created them in the force, or what the actual cause was, right? So they leave it just vague enough. And now we have, of course, no opportunity for that because, they're just not there, I guess. But I don't know. This is one thing that I think we'll just have to, eventually chalk up to, kind of like the chosen one, who is the actual chosen one if you take George's conversation out of it. And what does that mean? What does the Mortis arc mean? It's going to be one of those mysteries that kind of lingers where we have enough data, but not quite enough to do a conclusion. And again, it seems like there's an interpretation of Soul versus maybe what we had between the mothers, where Soul is saying that she created the twins. I think maybe they said they created the twins, or maybe they created the other one. And so there's still a little bit of ambiguity there, at least in my mind. And maybe I just need to rewatch it all to be able to pull that all back together.
Yeah. No, and she said as much, I think, in one of the interviews. I think it was after probably 2 episodes ago. She said that was going to be a point that would be left open for discussion about whether or not they were created, naturally through the force, how that all, she wasn't going to necessarily try to get that. She was going to leave it up to us to interpret. So yeah, it seems like something we will probably debate for quite a bit of time.
But what's wonderful about this scene, and then the partner scene with it later on, is that this all fits directly into what Plagueis and company want, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Chimere, again, to Lauren's point, I think you can't quite figure out if Chimere is hearing this for the first time, whether it's a revelation for him, whether you just can't get any kind of read on him. And maybe that's intentional, but I think that's a missed opportunity in some ways too, of giving the audience a bit of an idea of whether this is a surprise or if maybe this was his goal and he kind of had an idea and now it's confirmation. What is it? Because I think that also would help us with, and maybe season 2 will enlighten us in some other ways about that. But I think as it fits in with the broader narrative of Plagueis, of what we hear from Palpatine many, many years later, I think all of that is a really fun connection to be able to do. But it would have been really nice to see Chimere truly give us some indication about whether he was expecting to hear, any of this type of stuff. Of course, this is a much later scene, but I love just the two scenes mirroring each other much in a similar way there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. All right, so she uses Pip to pick the lock on her little binders there. She shocks him with Pip and jumps into the escape ship and says, "See you in hell, Jedi." Nice callback to Empire Strikes Back. We finally got the big orbital pursuit scene. We've been talking about this forever. Finally came out. We were right. Like we said, it would probably happen on the ringed planet or moon or whatever it was there in the Brendok space area. So that certainly turned out to be the case. Now, he does look like he's about to ready to fire something. I don't think he's really going out to try to kill her. That would seem out of character. Although, like as we've talked about, sometimes the decisions they make don't really necessarily always make the most sense. But I don't think in this case he was trying to kill her. I took that as, yes, he probably would have been firing upon her. Maybe he would have taken some opening shots to kind of just threaten her. Maybe he would have tried to disable something rather than take her out. I thought maybe a tractor beam. I don't know if if the ship's even big enough to have a tractor beam. Usually that's not big enough, but who knows, right? Or it could have been some kind of tow cable or sort. I just don't get I never got the impression that he was out there trying to actually harm her. Now, from Basil's perspective, he doesn't know one way or the other. And so that would make sense for his character to go in and start tampering with everything on there, just trying to pull the plug on this because this doesn't feel right to him that he would be going after. So, Jonesy, any other interpretations of that one?
Yeah, there's no way he's going to fire on her because she's the reason why he thinks he has a vindication for all of his actions.
It's his evidence, right?
So he needs her. And so I think that he was targeting her. But again, I think it was to build suspense. Of course, Basil interpreting a woman because he's seeing Soul act in very odd ways that he's not expecting. And he's feeling very threatened by this. And, Basil's not sure what to make of it all. So I think that makes sense why Basil made the decisions. And it looks really sketchy and it looks really funny. But I don't know that we shoot blasters or lasers or anything with a switch. Usually there's something else, right? So, I was kind of on board with what you were going to. I think maybe more of a tractor beam or something, kind of a weird place to use it, but maybe something just to be able to slow her down and actually reach her. But again, zero sense that he would, and I think zero reason why he would shoot her down and no intent of shooting her down. I think that was just building suspense so Basil would do something and get us two back to the planet too, right? A little plot convenience there, but yeah.
Maybe there was maybe that switch pulls in those ships are part together, right? So it's kind of like some recovery setup or process. You got to get real close and then it pulls it in and docks it back where it was or something. I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of it all. But anyways, May does end up crashing on Brendock. No explosions again in Star Wars, which is always fun. It's always been that case. So I did enjoy that. All right, let's go to Coruscant, and we finally get to meet Senator Ravencourt, and it turned out to be David Harwood, who we've been talking about. I think we were speculating whether or not he would be Plagueis or the Sith Master of some sort. Turned out to be a senator. I thought it was a good scene. I enjoy his acting. He does, like, every one of his lines is delivered just extremely well. I mean, that guy's amazing. But I did like that Vern still will not use any of the buttons. She uses the Force to open every door and closes every door so far.
I mean, why not? I guess.
Right, yeah. I do the same thing too, honestly. So, but he did make he asked her, like, how was your traveling through hyperspace? That's funny because they almost clarify, like, all the feedback that the hateful people in Star Wars were saying, like, about why that was. Here they go ahead and answer. It's like, I'm not sick to my stomach. It's just, in my head or whatever, a bad experience. But yeah, let's talk about, I guess, from Raven. It's Ravencourt's.
Ravencourt, yeah.
But in Ravencourt's, his perspective is, look, the Jedi are a cult, and there's a lot of murders going on. He's probing her. He's finding out that, at first he's thinking it's just one murder. Now it turns out that there are multiple victims here. He starts pressing to find out whether or not who these were. Is one of them a Jedi? And that's when she kind of cuts him off. And they have a great exchange after that around this massive system of unchecked power posing as a religion, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable. She says, we don't control the Force. He says their emotions. When he said your emotions, I was like, oh, crap, that is absolutely spot on. And especially think about it from the context of where they are in the High Republic, right? The High Republic Jedi, they're very in tune with their emotions. They let them come out so much. And so we don't know what kind of other experiences he's been privy to or he's read about that have just happened here recently in the last 100 or 200 years. So I love that context of it. I love the way that happened. And then he alludes to, what happens if one of these Jedi snaps. Of course, he's kind of foreshadowing, Anakin Skywalker, who's there to stop him. But yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting opinion. It's a very interesting take. Seems very aggressive for a senator to come out. I wonder if there's something there with that character himself, like he's been a victim. It's like so many other people in the galaxy to the Jedi's power, their arrogance, their, the hubris, or, the lack of sometimes in the name of the galaxy or in the name of defense, they take actions that have, ramifications and downstream impacts to people. He may have grown up like that as well. But Jonesy, I guess your take on any of the the comments here during the scene.
Well, I just had a question for Lauren. Is this kind of a callback to, what was his name, Senator Toon in the books? Wasn't Senator Toon like always kind of at odds with the Jedi a little bit, especially early on in the Nihil conflict?
It is familiar. If I remember correctly, I believe that with Senator Toon, it was much more deception and not quite so overt.
Okay.
If I'm remembering correctly, unless I'm getting Senator Toon confused with another senator, which is always possible.
It's been a couple years since those books, so you'd be
Right.
forgiven. Yeah.
And I mean, I do feel like every once in a while we do get a senator that pops up that is
Right.
not down with the Jedi thing. So it does remind me of that though. And I will say what I love about this scene is with him being so just like overt in what he's saying, there are times that you're like, okay, this is a huge exaggeration. Like, you know, this person obviously has personal emotions involved. And then there's other times where you do kind of get what he's saying and you do kind of see his concerns because Vernestra's obviously hiding something. So I liked it that you kind of have both sides of, okay, this person's taking it way too far with what they're saying. And also, I kind of see where they're coming from a little bit too, though.
Yeah, he was not wrong, and he was onto something. He knew something was going on, so his instincts were serving him well in that regard.
Yeah, and his
So-
comments where he's talking about the senators can't see a life without the Jedi or what that might mean, I think is probably the most telling part of the conversation of, you know, they idolize them. They put them up as these heroes and they can't imagine life without them in any kind of way. And so they get complacent. They make decisions and they end up giving more power to this body than probably maybe they should, and more trust. And I think that's his point. I think what I really liked about the delivery of all of this is that he wasn't necessarily against the Jedi or had a problem with them specifically. It's just how much autonomy that they have. And there's I wouldn't call it a fear, but there's a healthy respect for what they can do that other people can't, and the type of disadvantage if they were to be at odds with the Jedi, what would they do about it? And we know that, and it sounds like at least during this phase, if we draw from the High Republic books, there's not really a cohesive military or anything like that for the Republic, right? And we get that in the prequels too. They had to go and create a grand army of the Republic. So the Republic Defense Coalition and things like that, we don't know if it survived or not. It might, but again, it was still kind of a ragtag group in many ways. So they don't have a way of combating that if something were to happen. And so, yeah, I think it's a healthy respect and healthy fear of saying, hey, do we know what they're doing? And again, this is just drawing them more into the Republic, not corruption machine, but at the, just more of the political base of it. And calling them a political enemy, I think is probably a little bit extreme. But I think from the Jedi perspective, that kind of makes sense that they're concerned about some of that because they don't want to lose that autonomy. And this is actually a lot of what Luke Skywalker did in the expanded universe with the New Jedi Order. They had a very similar conversations in those stories as well.
Mm-hmm. He does mention that he's going to report the lack of transparency to Chancellor Drellick. He mentions that there's an invite coming to a tribunal. It's going to kind of do an investigation of all that. It's good foreshadowing. Of course, we see that at the very end there. And he has that quip of good luck. No, what is it you say? Oh, yes. May the force be with you kind of thing. It's like,
That
wow.
was just low.
Yeah. And I honestly was thinking
That was
about
a
it.
cheap
Is is that the first time they've said it in the series? Or did they say it early on?
I want to say they said it early on.
Yeah, maybe they did.
I feel like they must have.
I can't remember now if they did.
I
or
want
not.
to say Vernestra may have said it too.
Yeah. Either way, it was kind of a, he didn't mean it sincerely. Of course, he was
He's being a jerk face.
being a jerk about it all. So, all right.
He was okay in my book until he made that comment. Like, "Oh, you're just a you know what."
Yeah, exactly. So we go back to the unknown planet. This is where we've kind of talked about this conversation here. I did like the line of, "Did I ever give you the impression that I was a fair person after he just murdered a bunch of people?" That makes absolute sense. But yeah, he tells her, he asks her, "Would you ever consider?" She says no. He says, "You're not like your sister." And I think we've already talked about, what were the motivations there to allow her to either make the decision on her own and even take her. But let's talk about Plagueis. I don't know that anybody's arguing that this is not Plagueis. I think the only thing, when we were talking about early on, if we were to see a master, who the possibilities would be. I think we did this in the final hype show. I think we did it at some point during one of the Patreon shows. And I think we had talked about Plagueis as being potentially on the list with an asterisk, meaning they're probably going to have to redo some Legends things, right? The age of Plagueis, and that's fine. Like, I'm not really, I'm not beholden to that novel. I like that they're pulling concepts and ideas from the novel itself. As much as I love the novel, I don't think anybody's going to say they didn't like it. But yeah, this would certainly change, I think, the timeline, or at least his age. I don't know. Either one of you have any concerns with this? Are you guys really heartbroken that that would be, potentially making him younger, older, whatever the case may be?
I'm okay with the timeline being adjusted as long as it makes sense where he fits into the story and the character makes sense to be there. If they explain it at least somewhat, then if the timeline changes a little bit, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if they get the big stuff right and the things that I think matter most, that feel the most important, even if they reshape them a touch,
yeah,
I think as long as they're adhering to the spirit of what came before in Legends, especially the really pivotal moments, I think that's what matters most. And I don't think we saw them adjust kind of well, finger quotes here, adjust Ki-Adi-Mundi's age, a little bit. So if they did this again with Plagueis, I think that's okay because we don't really have a lot of clarity around when some of those things happened anyway. And we know one thing we do know is how many years we have until Palpatine is born. So there's a lot of room there to do things with Tenebris and with Plagueis and others as well. There could be others in the mix that weren't necessarily the rule of two Sith, but others that came in and out, and maybe this Acolyte type of methodology and ideology and that type of thing, much like Ventress. And Ventress worked out really well, right? If you remember Ventress's introduction, a lot of people were very concerned about that too, right? That breaks rule of two. Even Dooku raised a lot of concerns. We ended up loving the character, and it worked really well. And we got a new perspective on what it meant to be an acolyte of the Sith, but you are not Sith. And Dooku tells her that in Clone Wars, not the Clone Wars. So kind of an interesting one there, but same type of thing. As long as we get these big moments right, I think we're still going to be very happy with where we go. We know we're not going to retell Legends. I mean, we just have to. Right. We just have to kind of.
We've never done that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. We're just not going to do it because that's just boring, right? And well, I say it's boring. It's good stuff, but I mean, why would we want to see exactly what we've seen written before? Like, we want a slightly different shape on it. Some of these stories are 20 plus years old. We need to bring them up to date too.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that at all. Like, and that may seem progressive, but I'm okay with it. Like, there's certain things that I certainly hold as being canon, stuff that we shouldn't touch, shouldn't break. The series hasn't done any of that, and the things that they are bringing to light are stuff that, I grew up with, I loved. I know I've talked so much about Heir to the Empire and how much I've loved that series, but I'm okay if they take some creative changes and would give us a new twist on it. I mean, that's sacred to me, but I'm okay with it. I don't mind at all.
They did. They made it all irrelevant. So you're welcome.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Well, Heir to the Empire still exists, so
exactly,
they're not taking it away.
They're
from
not
you,
taking it away, and
right.
I'm being fatalistic here and dramatic, but they're not taking that away from me. I can always go pick up that book and read it and enjoy it if I want to. So. But Plagueis, I'm excited. I like the idea that we saw him. He looked good. I was like, oh my God, it's, Voldemort. Oh wait, no, that's Plagueis. But I did enjoy that little Easter egg. And again, it feels like that is kind of an investment to ensure, at least hope, make it more probable that we're going to get a season 2. Because now we all want to know, like, how does he play into all this stuff, especially now with the change.
Leslie Headland talked about that in one of the articles, right? I can't remember if it was the Collider article or was one of the other ones, but she had talked a little bit about that too, about how Plagueis might work in, and that would be like a season 2, I believe. So this makes a lot of sense. Hey, one thing we didn't mention at the opening scene was that when Osha does get the helmet, or when Kamir takes the helmet off of Osha, you can actually see her eyes are slightly reddish orange, by the way.
Oh.
You have to really be paying attention. It's subtle, but it is absolutely there.
Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to Soul's ship. So this is where Soul turns on the homing beacon. He tries to feel for Osha, which, it's different when he's looking for Osha than anybody else. He has that former master and Padawan connection. So I'm chalking that up to that. You've got Basil sniffing around. I don't know. That guy's kind of weird. I don't know what he wants in this.
Thank you. Someone at least agrees with me.
In this series.
It creeps
He's
me out.
He's fun enough to make up for it. I don't care.
I know. He is pretty cute. I will say that. And then we go back over to an interesting scene. I when I first saw this, there were a couple of moments like this and some of the things that Renestra Rose says a little bit later, I think that were kind of red herrings, that she could still potentially be bad or evil in some sort. She's making a call, and we've said, I know, we've never been on board with that and said it would never happen. I think we were 100% right there. But she's making this call to someone that we didn't know. was unorthodox or whatever the comment was. I assume that was Yoda that she was trying to set up some time with to speak to him. Anybody disagree? If not, we'll move on.
I think that's probably accurate.
Yeah, I could see that.
And so Mog comes in, breaks the news. Hey, we found his homing beacon. They're on Brendock. I love her look. I want to get that in a GIF because she's like, oh God, I should have known that that's where, of all places, that's where this guy was going. And Vern says that they need to get the ship ready, grab as many Jedi Knights because it's going to be more of a resolution as opposed to a confrontation. Although we didn't necessarily see a confrontation. I was hoping we would see a confrontation. We didn't get that. That's okay. But we definitely, I would say, got a resolution, at least from her perspective.
Hey, the body count had to end somewhere, Albert. Sorry to disappoint.
I know. I was like, look at all this fodder. This is going to be great. Kamira is going to slaughter all of these guys.
Oh
I can't
my
wait
God,
to see that.
no.
Everyone put on your red robes.
I
Yes,
cannot go
please.
back to that. No.
We move over to Osha and Kamir flying that little cloud car kind of throwback thing there, right? She cuts the power off, which was interesting. Is like you look on his face and he's thinking, man, this is my ship. Like, how did I get in this situation? She's turning off the power on me. But so they already, Osha says that they're already there. She knows that Sol and May are there. Sol sees a ship fly in. And he's almost got a sense of dread about him. If you look at his face, he's almost thinking like, oh my gosh, this is really maybe where it all ends. Like this is coming to a head. Everybody's, congregating here. They have the little small elevator scene where May ends up, slicing into the elevator. And then Kamir just disappears, which I think it's very interesting because May does the same thing a little bit later. This seems to be some kind of a power that they've come up with and created. I'm trying to remember if there were episodes in either Rebels or in Clone Wars where we saw Palpatine or other Sith kind of almost disappear into the ether like this. It seems like it is a trait or some kind of characteristic. Either of you remember any of that?
I don't think so.
I think this is them just using the Force to run away really fast. So
Oh, that's what it was.
Maybe
it was.
Like I said, we keep it simple these days, right? So
Yeah.
I think at least for May, like when she goes away, because we haven't seen any evidence, and then they explain how she survived as a kid too, and it wasn't any kind of disappearing act or the smoke or anything like that. So I think it's just a Sithy stealthiness, I guess, that they can just disappear, which makes a lot of sense, right? And the Jedi can do it too. I don't think it's exclusive to the bad guys, right? I think the Jedi could disappear if they wanted to, just by being very stealthy and slick.
Well, I think they were trying to signal this is some kind of a new power because I think it was it here where you heard him very faintly say, what was it he said? Are you sure? When she said there's the only way to get in there was through the elevator. He says, are you sure? And it's almost like an echo effect, like he had disappeared or dissipated in some way.
I kind of viewed that as him talking through the Force, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. Lauren, any ideas there?
I don't have any strong opinions. I feel like I need more information to know
Force
for
power.
sure.
Got it. Okay. Now it was interesting to see Saul walk around among ghosts. He's walking around throughout this scene and another scene a little bit later. He's haunted by the sounds, all these echoes of all the events that had happened. And then he kind of comes across when he walked up to that kind of what I'm calling the decision point where he had to make that choice between which child to save. That music got really creepy there. And there's a couple of instances where the music changes. You've got more of the chanting. The witches are coming. The witches' chants are coming into the music itself. It gets a little bit eerie. So by the way, there was some really cool use of like violins in this episode. And throughout the series, really. So I always forget who did the music for this one, but
Michael Nichols.
Yes, thank you. I thought he did a great job. Like there was some great moments in here.
It was really
and certainly
well done.
moments that stood out. And we talk about that a lot about, do we remember the songs from these, different shows? And this was one of them. I think that, there are some musical beats and some snippets here that are definitely memorable for me. All right, let's talk about Sol and Kamir. This is their first battle. A lot of eye candy here. Kamir comes across Sol. He thanks him for finding May. We make a good team or whatever he was saying there. But yeah, another fantastic fight between Manny and JJ. You can definitely tell they put in the time and the effort for this. It doesn't look awkward. It doesn't look slow. Really snappy choreography. I thought they did a great job with it. A lot of different uses of everything around them. It's just not, sabers clashing, but there's a lot of environmental things that they do as well. I liked This is maybe a controversial question. I haven't been a biggest fan of the new look that Disney's going with on these lightsabers. Like, it doesn't have the white. It's not as bright. But I mean, again, maybe I don't want to say I'm drinking from the fountain here, but it's starting to grow on me. Like, I like it because it looks more, I don't know if realistic is the way I would call it, but it doesn't look as cartoony sometimes as the old lightsabers that we have in, like, the original trilogy or even the prequel trilogy. You guys, how do you feel about the new lightsaber looks themselves?
I'm okay with it. I kind of like the cartoony look, honestly. I think I'm a little bit partial to that, but I'm fine with how they're doing it now too. Just because I prefer the old way doesn't mean I dislike this way.
The lighting looks more natural, I think, if that makes any sense. But I don't know. Jonesy, what do you think?
So I think in the night scenes, they work pretty well. And I think that's why they kind of invented these, right? So they could do them for more dimly lit scenes where you actually get that natural glow. And I think they do look fantastic. I think in the daylight scenes, they don't work quite as well. And I think I'm a little bit traditional of this. I like rotoscoping. That's the technique that they originally applied to do the lightsabers. And they've done some variation of that effect for many, many years afterwards. So I prefer that. But I think in the night scenes, the practical lightsabers actually work pretty well. And they give you a different, more natural lighting, like you were saying, which I think really is, it does add something extra to it. And it really does give the actors something else to gravitate towards. It's not just a stick, right? And there's a little more to it. I think it probably wraps them into it just a little bit
more immersive in that way.
Exactly. And I think with the fight scene in general, I think I had one moment I didn't really particularly care for. It's when they kind of swooped down and they kind of swooped out a little bit. And this may be the Matrix moment you were
this is
about.
Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah, that's the one thing I didn't particularly care for. It just kind of, the wire work was just a little bit, I wouldn't say it's awkward because it was well done. It just looked kind of funny. Like it was.
Do you think if they would have tightened that shot up a little bit, well, not tightened the shot, but necessarily maybe clipped it a little bit more so you didn't see the trail off at the very end? Do you think that would have worked better?
Yeah, it's called a punch in. If you punch into that frame, you punch in a little bit closer, it cuts off the legs and stuff like that to where you can't see some of that effect. I think that's a great point. I think that would have worked much better. It wouldn't have looked like they were just kind of floating because it was a weird blend of forcey stuff going on also, and maybe a little bit of slow motion to where it would just created a bit of a awkwardness, and they were so wide on the shot, which generally is really cool to see. And we really liked that back in the previous flashback. Right. But in this scene, I think it just added a little awkwardness to it.
Yeah. Let's see. There was also, I guess, in this fight scene here, we had the little triple kick kind of thing where he finally kind of kicks Kamir back.
I actually kind of like that.
Yeah, it was cool. We had seen that move before. I think it might have been when May was fighting Soul back early on in episode 2, something similar. But I guess the real question was, what was it? It was almost like a force blast, if to use something from like KOTOR or SWOTOR, where he like summoned the force and was able to blow back not only Kamir's incoming punch, but also both of the lightsabers, which I absolutely love. But whatever this technique is that he's using to whip these things around, this is now the second time he's used it. He was able to kind of force blast, force push everything back. And then on top of that, he's such a badass in this episode because if you really look at it, he does go from emotions of anger, but he tends to always come back to calmness. There's a couple of great shots in there where he's just very calmly right back at it. And he seems to be, again, we talked about this. I don't know that Kamir really has an upper hander ever. Sure, he's got a couple shots in there, and he seems to be pretty well adept at lightsaber combat. But it's, as far as I'm concerned, Saul wins just every time. Like, he's clearly above and beyond him in terms of technique. And so that didn't bode well for Kamir. We could see that, and certainly culminates with him getting his lightsaber kind of cut off there at the very end. But I guess any other kind of thoughts on this? You guys want to add anything to what stood out for you, favorite moments from this fight? And Zora Allens has got a question here. Which of the duels in this show is your favorite, if you want to tackle that one?
For me, definitely this one. I feel like there was some really interesting like choreography and kind of tricks that they were doing. It was just very flashy. And of course, I liked it that Soul had the upper hand too. So that made me like it more as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a very similar reaction. Like, this is straight out of SWOTOR, actually.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
With the summoning of it. It just kind of felt like it was just so video game-ish, but it was still really cool and well done because you're like, oh, crap, does he see the lightsabers coming behind him? What is he doing? And then just the motion and the action, it was so smooth and just a very subtle effect too in order to do the last, and you actually see the effect on Chimera was really well done. My favorite fight scene though was still probably episode 5 with Chimera taking on all the Jedi and with Jackie like doing the Jackie twirls and all of that stuff. It was just so much energy. It was really kinetic, and I thought that was a really great scene. I know it's really painful. Sorry, Lauren, but
Yeah, that's why I don't like it. It's too
it was a
painful.
really intense and really well done choreographed event, and the brutality of all of it, while difficult, was actually really well executed, I thought.
Yeah, I think mine was still probably the episode 5. That whole fight, that battle, it's just a lot of great stuff going on there.
There's moments in every
different
single
times.
one of them though that are just like, that's freaking amazing though. That's
Yeah.
really fun and really cool, which is the nice thing. They kept pushing the envelope. They didn't go back and just revisit the same stuff. They gave you something a little different each time, which I thought was really nice.
Yeah. I just posted in the comments too, but check out the Deceived trailer for SWTOR.
Yep.
You're going to see a lot of similarities. Everything from the choreography to the slow motion effects to being able to use the force to push stuff off. Just check out all the SWTOR trailers. Honestly, they're all just amazingly done and choreographed. But this had a lot of that vibe, a lot of that energy, a lot of that flow, if you will, channeled in this fight, and maybe some in a little bit later in the smaller fight that we have there. But okay, so let's talk about, and this is a little bit out of order because they're kind of jumping back and forth. So I was trying to compartmentalize these a little bit. But this, at the same time, May is kind of walking around. She's hearing stuff for all these echoes as well, echoes of the past. She eventually makes her way into the room where she left Osha at to burn, essentially. And eventually Osha walks in and they have the conversation where Osha still blames May for everything. May tells her that, she says that, May, you never wanted me to become a Jedi. She ends that whole argument by saying, you got what you wanted. I thought that was a nice little touch there on the writing. And she also says that she prevented her from becoming a Jedi, but she was never over the grief of, May betraying her as well as the death of her mother. I was hoping we would get confirmation about whether or not she was actually kicked out of the order or she left on her own. I think that kind of left that open, or at least they put some question or doubts, I guess, in our heads. But we didn't really get that. And I'm assuming she did leave on her own based on what this conversation was. I would think she would be completely honest and transparent in this moment with May and explain to her why she never made it as a Jedi. But I don't know. Do you guys have a theory or any thoughts one way or the other? Which way are you leaning on this now?
Well, earlier in the season 2, she said the way she talked about it also made me think that it was her own choice. Maybe other people thought it was a good idea, but that ultimately it was mainly her making the decision. So with that already influencing what kind of like my interpretation of this conversation, I do think it was Osha's own decision to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And it was her failure. I think the real question is, what did failure actually mean? Did she fail something, or she was just failing to adhere to the ideals of the Jedi of what she knew she should do, and that led to her withdrawal? But I think she left. I think it's more of a question of what did failure actually mean? Was it a failure in the eyes of the Jedi, or just a failure in the eyes of Osha of what she thought it meant to be a Jedi?
Yeah, I don't know that we'll ever get that answered. I think in my own headcanon, maybe she was never really able to reach her full potential because of that. And she wasn't accelerating as quickly as she should have been. There were probably people doubting the fact why she was even there, given her age, and that feel like she got a free pass from Saul. He probably did everything he could to help her, and she just wasn't getting it. And because that was constantly a border she could never break through, and suppress the emotions. I don't even think that's in her character, right? She seems to be a very emotional character, and suddenly, she wanted the limelight, or not necessarily limelight, but she wanted to become a Jedi, and she wanted all the fancy stuff she saw as a kid. She wanted that lifestyle, but what she couldn't wrestle with and what she could never truly give up was those emotions. And that's a huge part of it, right? Every one of these Jedi have to figure out how to suppress that in a lot of ways, or at least deal with the emotions and then kind of move on from it. And so I think from her perspective, I'm never going to really be as good as anybody else here around here. And it's already been some time. And so I'm just going to bow out and go live my life and, be relegated to, whatever, she was a technician or whatever. But that's me. That's speculation purely on my part, but that's where my head's at. So May goes into a little bit more truth, right? She finally tells her, look, Saul killed your mother. She tells Osha that he's a liar. She has an interesting line. She says, how could he teach you to control your negative emotions? He's the reason you have them. You didn't fail. He did. That's very eye-opening. I think it was eye-opening for Osha. That was probably kind of the tipping point at that point, because I think this is where she really rages at her at that. It was probably more, wrestling with the truth and the honesty in those words than anything else. But this is where we kind of get their battle where they're going back and forth, and we cut over between the legs crossing to the lightsabers clashing, which I thought was a brilliant cut, honestly. While they're fighting too, we got more of the witchy music, much more of the witchy chants that are going on. And Osha's very, very angry. I mean, we just made the point about her being very emotional, but this is the most anger I think we've seen her so far. But Jonesy, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the dialogue between May and Osha with, that he failed her is a callback to one of the first episodes, right? When Soul says to Osha, maybe I wasn't a very good teacher. So some of those things are now becoming reality for Osha, that, okay, there's doubt here, but I think she's also defending him. May is also falling back into the old habits of, or at least maybe through Osha's perspective here, falling back into the old habits of making excuses. It wasn't me, or I didn't really do all the things as much. And I think as much as Soul doesn't necessarily admit to anything until the very end, I think May is also struggling with admitting that she started the fire, right? She really did start the fire. That is a fact,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
That was all her fault. That was her decision. And she's the one that locked them all in. And the rest is just justification for it. And we could argue that she's not wrong, but also the facts are what they are. So that's tough to reconcile for us when we know that we were trying to do the right thing from a different perspective here, not the Jedi, but from May's perspective of trying to protect her family, protect her home, protect her sister, her mothers, everyone, because that's what she feels like she was supposed to be doing, and Coral certainly, encouraging all of that type of behavior. And then for it to go so poorly, she has to come to terms with some of that too. And she does later on, but I think in this moment, Osha's trying to call her out on her BS, saying, you're in denial too. So how can I trust what you're doing? And then she just, then all the anger and the rage kind of takes over.
Mm-hmm. In the chat, Zorellen says, it probably didn't help that Soul really placed Osha on a pedestal. That's bound to add pressure and give a sense of failure for not meeting those expectations, right? I mean, the focus and the spotlight is on her at that age, coming in as a Padawan.
Oh gosh, and when we get to the dialogue, just hearing a little bit with Soul and Osha, you definitely feel that. It's a great point.
Yeah. Alex says, I blame the parents. So, yeah.
You would.
He would.
It's either their fault or Albert's fault.
Yeah, he's channeling more pent-up aggression towards me here. Okay, let's...
you don't have any dad takes on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, do you want me to talk about bad parenting in Star Wars? Because we could do a whole show on that, honestly. The bar is set so low as parents in Star Wars, trust me. We can only go up from here. But, all right, so we get the transition from legs to sabers, and at that point, the Jedi shuttle arrives, and this is where Soul says, now you pay for what you've done. I loved his line of, "Oh, they're not here for me." Like,
so wonderful.
It was really wonderfully delivered. Honestly, yeah. I did enjoy that quite a bit. At the same time, there's a quick scene where we cut back over to Osha and May. They see the shuttle approaching, and this is where Osha disappears, just kind of in thin air, kind of thing. So, interesting that they keep doing this. It all makes, it makes for good story. I don't know that anybody really needs to get to the bottom of why they're and how they're able to do this. It's because they're Jedi, and we've already accepted so many other things.
Glad you feel that way, because we won't. Yeah.
Right. We're not going to. This is one of those things in Star Wars that you just accept and roll on. Otherwise, turn it off, because
it's like trying to make sense of it in a horror movie, right?
Yeah.
How does Michael Myers show up at your doorstep when you left him literally 100 meters back?
Yeah, it's the shape. That's just how it works.
Right.
All right, we get some more fighting. This is Sol and Kamir, I guess part 3 at this point. They're going back and forth a few more times, lightsabers clashing. And eventually, this is where Sol is kind of pushing in on Kamir with his lightsaber. He's almost overpowering him, just brute strength. And that's one of the moments where you see Sol's face, and he looks angry. Like, he looks like, it's finally kind of getting to him. There's a shot in there that I want to get another Jiffy movie of, where the sparks are just like speckling off of the helmet. It's brilliant. I loved it. It looks just amazing. And then when we get that single lightsaber, you can't help but think of the Twin Sons episode in Star Wars Rebels, where they have the samurai showdown kind of thing, and Kenobi does that one slice, and he's standing there posed. I didn't get a chance. I can't remember if that was exactly the same pose, but when that happened, I thought, oh my God, Kamir's dead. Like, they've killed him. all my theories are out the door. People are never going to let me forget this. But thankfully, it was just the tip of his lightsaber. But yeah, I thought he was done. I thought he was that Soul had really kind of came out ahead here on this one. What did you guys think?
I thought you had Chimera dying.
I did, but not this way.
Oh, not this way. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I didn't have Chimera dying. I said Chimera. No, I never did. I had Chimera and Osha living on because I wanted to see that ship.
Oh, okay.
That relationship and how
makes
that,
sense.
with the emotion behind it. I know.
I'm not with you on that.
I know, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to disagree, guys. It's fine.
All right, well, good. Well, I've got a list of grievances.
I'm feeling a lot of emotions.
We'll touch on that here.
Yeah, we will. We got to do a separate show on that one. So let's see. But yeah, so this is where he then takes off his helmet. He turns around. His Soul's got him, holding him right there at kind of at lightsaber point.
He almost like steps up into it just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I dare you. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah, make your move, buddy. And this is where May walks in. She surprises him, catches him off guard, wrestles with the lightsaber, takes it out of his hand. And then we get kind of echoes of, Return of the Jedi here. He says, good, May, feel your anger. This is the source of your pain. She does a Luke Skywalker, no, I'll never join you kind of thing, throwing the lightsaber off. I mean, that's not lost on us. And they're, it's always fun when they do little parallels like that. I do like that. But she says he ends up going on and even further in more parallels, saying, strike him down and your journey will be complete. She says no, and says that she wants him to confess, face the council, the Senate, the Republic, pay for his crimes. That is probably the most, dying. Sure, that's kind of hard to take for most people. But somebody like a Jedi, somebody like Soul, his character, that's probably more devastating. That's probably, again, what we talked about with the death of how do you kill a Jedi. I know, Jonesy, this is what you were kind of pushing towards, is you kill a Jedi by ruining them, right? Their reputation,
right.
Running them into the ground kind of thing. But Lauren, I want to ask you, when you're watching this and you're kind of seeing this is the beginning of a number of things that happen here over the next few minutes here that happened to Soul, unfortunately, leading it up to his death. That was kind of difficult for me to watch because I was just a huge proponent and fan of him. I was calling him the father figure, the first coming of Qui-Gon Jinn. There were so many things I like about it, but we were seeing him basically be deconstructed right before our eyes when this started happening.
Yeah, and like the thing that's hard for me, I mean, it's just personally not the direction I wanted the character to go in. So it's just, my own personal feelings about it. I didn't get what I wanted. And the other thing that was complicated for me too is that, yes, he did kill the mother. That is what happened. But nobody ever addresses the circumstances of why he killed the mother, which I feel like that's relevant because the way they're talking about it, they're making it sound like he did this in cold blood, just completely ruthless, like she was totally defenseless. There's never any discussion of what was actually going on when he killed her. And to me, that kind of absolves Soul of a lot of what they're saying. So I don't know. It was a tough scene for me, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like and this is where at the top of the show, we were talking about some of the decisions and some of the character motives. That is one of the ones I have highlighted here is not to jump ahead, but so much of this could have been avoided or at least mitigated had he just said, look, I was trying to save you. Your mom turned into smoke. I didn't know what that was. Then May started turning into smoke. I freaked out.
It was really scary.
It was really scary. I had a lot of emotions going on at the time, right? I was, I needed the money. Whatever it was, it felt like had he just said that probably would have, again, mitigated or at least a lot of what was going on here and put some rightful doubt in their minds about whether or not this guy was a cold-blooded killer.
I have a question for y'all. So why is it that you think, and I don't know if we really get an answer on this, do y'all have any theories as to why May now wants Soul to stand trial instead of to kill him? I know, Albert, you were talking about how that could be worse for a Jedi than death, but earlier she was trying to kill Soul. So, like, what do y'all think caused the change?
I don't know that I have a good answer. It's one of the, it's a sticky question. They didn't really give us a lot there. Like at one point, like she's gone back and forth. She's wanted to kill him. Then she was like, no, I'm not going to kill him. She had opportunities to do so. She didn't take them when she did. Right. We talked about that, I think during episode 5, maybe 6. I forget now. She's had ample opportunities to kill him, and she didn't. And then we kind of chalk that up to is, okay, well, she really wants to go back to her sister, and that's really what her motivation has been this whole time. Her motive has been, I want to reunite with my sister, and she didn't necessarily get that. And so maybe at least at this point, they really weren't. They were just fighting. She got away. And so maybe she's thinking, okay, I'm not going to get her back. So the least I could do is hold him accountable, make him, make OSHA see exactly what I'm talking about, be vindicated about what had happened and what really happened by holding him trial. And after that, then OSHA will get on board and we can finally be together. That's how I would rationalize it. But there really wasn't a whole lot there that they gave us. I don't know, Jonesy, what are your thoughts?
I think where I was coming from, and again, I saw some other reviews out there that maybe this wasn't the way to tear the Jedi down. This wasn't killing a Jedi without a weapon. It was literally just the Force choke. And I don't know why it can't be both. And I think May maybe deep down finally understood, like, the only way I can really make meaningful change and truly take the Jedi down a notch isn't just killing one of them. It really is showing them to everybody else that, hey, these people, and this is like what Ray and Court were saying, these people that you would put up on this pedestal, you can't always trust them to do the right thing or do in your best interest, because here's an example where they did it and then they did something wrong and then they covered it up and they keep doubling down on it. And so I think the one thing about where Soul, and I wanted him to be able to give all the reasons because we just want to explain ourselves all the time. But the one thing I liked about that scene, while it was difficult, what I liked about it though is that Soul was just finally exhausted and tired and was like, I just have to say it. I just have to admit that this is what I did, and I can't keep making excuses for it. And I just need to lay it out there, right? Especially for OSHA, and just finally admit to it. Now, he didn't really want to admit it to OSHA. He was just trying to do it to May, but I think he was finally just at that point where he has to let this stuff go and be the Jedi and accept accountability. And the first step is to admit that what you did was wrong, and to admit the actual action you did and stop excusing it for all the other things, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, it was unfortunate that it happened that way, but the reason why he did it was because he was colored with all of these emotions, and he was trying to protect them, and he was overreacting with less information and interpreting a lot of information very, very quickly and feeling like he had to spring to action very quickly. Everything was heightened already. So I think that's where May's shift finally came to, is like, we finally got them exactly where we want them, and now we need the rest of the galaxy to see this. My personal vendetta is not going to make a big difference in the grand scheme of things. So how do I actually do it? So that's why I still like that theory that this is how you start to take the Jedi down. And I mentioned this to a couple of different people. I was speaking with my friend Kate at work about it because she wanted to decompress the episode. And I think one of the things I said was, this is where the light of the Jedi, and I say that very intentionally, starts to fade. And it's in these moments here, and then, of course, what we see with Vernestra, that you actually feel like this is that turning point where we have actually made a shift, a fundamental shift in the Jedi Order as an order, multiple people making these types of decisions now willfully that are kind of pointing us in a different direction, and we have set a different path than what we've been doing for the previous several hundred years. Yeah. So I think some of that, while maybe not as articulate in May's mind in the moment, I think those types of themes might be going through and kind of encouraging her actions, and why there's a shift there for it all.
Yeah. Yeah. In the chat, I think Jenny's kind of saying what I'm saying to you. I took it that May wanted him and the Jedi to suffer, and that story would be told. Yes. Yep. And then Zorellen said, agreed, Jonesy. It's about truth and accountability. Killing Indara and Torben didn't change the public narrative that Brendock incident was her fault entirely. Many people made bad choices that night. So
May does point out that, or OSHA does point out that Soul never actually blamed May necessarily. He used May as a fact that colored the truth, right? Mm-hmm. And this is where truth is not fact. They're not the same thing in archaeology or anything else. So yeah, that you have to discern the difference between the two. And this is kind of a use case for a lot of that.
In this, Lauren, did you want to add anything before we move on to the confession here?
No, I'm ready. We're good.
Yeah, so this is where things really kind of get heavy and hot. But of course, OSHA overhears this, and she asks him, to basically confess. He finally breaks down, says, it almost like he was going to go into like another excuse, another reason to try to reason himself out of this. he finally breaks down. You can see it on his face. He's emotional. The weight of this guilt for so many years has finally come to bear. And he finally says, yes, I did. And, she says, is this true? He says, I was protecting you. I was trying to do the right thing. And this is in that moment where I think he would have done well.
I did the right thing. Right?
Yeah.
He was doubling down. I did the right thing. Right. It was
right.
assertive. Right.
And I think in his perspective, and even from our perspective, I think he was doing the right thing given the circumstances. But back to Lauren's point, why didn't he just say, here's what that means? This is why I felt I was doing the right thing, because you were in danger. I thought you were in danger. Your mom is wacko. She does some crazy stuff sometimes.
Well, we all were in danger. Yeah.
Yeah. All of us were. Exactly. Let's see. She asked, why didn't you just tell the Jedi? He kind of goes back into with May, there's no proof that you were created in this way. Again, he's trying to more rationalization. Why didn't you tell me? And then he goes on, just starts talking. It's almost like he's still like he's admitted it, but he's still not what you were getting at, Jonesy. He's still not really there, and so he's kind of regressing and going back to, they'd never let you become the Jedi. I thought you did. I thought I did what was best for you. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I couldn't. And she's sitting there saying, "Stop talking, stop talking." I was not expecting the stop talking, meaning that she was about to force choke him, which was, I think, brilliant from a narrative perspective.
I thought it was Chimera at first. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even honestly think that until, when she had her hand up. I'm like, holy crap, she's doing this, But yeah, he's doing everything he can at this point, outside of saying, I was trying to save your life, when he ends with, I did everything because I love, and he was about to say, because I loved you, or I love you. And that is kind of extreme, I think. We've talked about his connection and how much of that was how much of that was predicated on the emotions that he was feeling when they went to Brendock all those years ago. But some of that was being driven, I think, by the will of the Force, him seeing her and feeling like, oh my gosh, this was destiny. We were destined to be here because of the Force. And so he developed a strong attachment, like Jackie points out earlier on in episode 1 or 2, whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody was aware that they had a close connection. And it was never creepy. I know people have said that. I never took it that way. It was really more of like a father and daughter, more than master and Padawan. I think he was looking at this as a kind of a father and daughter relationship. And in some ways it was, because she had no parents. And so he felt obligated in some ways to kind of fill that role, since he was responsible for a lot of it. So I think it all makes sense in the context of the character. I guess, I don't know, Jonesy, do you want to add anything to, I guess, his last words there of I loved you before he gets choked out?
Well, and I think leading up to it, he kept still trying to justify it of like, this is how I'm going to prove to the council, right? It was even about them. It was about him, and justifying everything that he did there was still coming back to there. All of that stuff, Osha hearing it's just got to be like, literally, she's just like, stop talking. But
yeah,
it was an emotional moment. And again, we can tell that he cared for her deeply. And I'm with you. I think this was a very fatherly type of, at least he viewed this as a very father-daughter type of relationship. I think she probably did too. With very much a father figure. A lot of responsibility that goes into that. And he had built a lot of that stuff up and took on that responsibility prematurely in order to do it but again, some of it is also because of the series of events that happened. So it compounded itself. And so he just kept doubling down on some of that, because that guilt makes you love them harder. And then you start making decisions that actually harm the kid or harm the child in a indirect way, because you are trying to keep up the things that make you feel better about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of therapy coming out right now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I'm glad we're all here for this, honestly. This next scene, I guess the next scene when he finally falls, he's fallen to his knees after she's kind of forced. This was really difficult to watch, because there were so many little things that were happening here. We had the tear running down his face. We see a tear roll down Osha's face at one point. This is where she is holding the lightsaber. And when made that little slight change, that's when I got really excited. Not because Soul was dying, but we kind of knew where this was going to go at that point, right? Like, oh my God, are they really going to do this?
I was like, are they really going to do this? Yeah. I said it out loud, and holy smokes, sure enough, we did.
And it makes sense the way they did it. I mean, they wanted to show it, which I don't have a problem with. And we talked about this at the top of the hour here, or top of the show. I didn't have a problem with the way they did it, but it would make sense. Otherwise, she would have to deconstruct the lightsaber, pull the blade, the kyber crystal out, and then do her little ritual thing. And they weren't going to go through all that. They wanted to show you this is how the process works. And, it's a different take on it, having done it with the still in the hilt that way.
My issue with it, if we want to even call it that, is that I just don't think we had enough. It wasn't as clear the emotion that was coming from OSHA to be able to actually bleed the crystal. And some of that might be colored by the other content that we have. Of course, when you're in a very visual medium like a comic book, you have to overexpress a lot of things, right? You have to really accentuate with other action and kinetic markers, and the art and the penciling all have to really get the point across loudly to you in many ways, because it's difficult to do subtlety in some ways. And so it was very subdued to where it didn't feel as powerful as maybe we have seen in other content. But that we got this on screen, though, I am absolutely stellar. And I'm with you. I think the way they did the effects on the crystal, and then when the blade actually started to change after it was ignited, I thought were very compelling and very interesting and a lot of fun. And so I was really happy that we got it. But the execution of how she bled the crystal left something for me to be desired there.
I think, Lauren, I want your thoughts on this, on that question or that topic, because I don't know where I can see it both ways. I think I'm more okay with what happened. I think Jonesy make a good point. They didn't give us necessarily enough to kind of like put two and two together that they would be that extreme that it would happen. Because in every other instance, there are some
been very extreme,
very extreme circumstances, very extreme trauma that's been happening.
It took Vader like 3 or 4 times to do it,
to get it right.
And then when Kylo did it, there's like, and all this other stuff, right?
Yeah, really there was a whole history there of stuff that had happened to him at that point.
Right.
Of course, almost being killed by his uncle. But that's
happens in every family.
But that's exactly right. I mean, there was a lot that was going into those bleeding, where this one maybe on the surface didn't. But I think we did talk about the fact that this was, essentially her parental figure. It was her master. And we said one of the worst things that she's going to find out, we said she would find out, and she's going to go absolutely ballistic, which she did, is if she finds out that she's been lied to by this person that she looked up to as a protective figure, someone she trusted, and for years and years and years she felt lied to, and she was deceived. Not to go back to the trailer we just talked about with SWTOR, but she felt deceived at this point. That was probably enough to at least get the crystal started. But we got to remember that there is a moment there where he actually gets out the words, "OSHA, it's okay. Like, go ahead, kill me. I'm fine with it. I need this off my chest, and this has gone on too far," kind of thing.
We need to talk about that too.
Yeah. Well, okay.
But I want Lauren's comments on all this.
Yeah. So I guess Lauren. So based on all that, right? All that happens, and then the crystal turns from red to blue. Do you feel like we were given enough context as to why she was able to bleed the crystal, regardless of the method? Was that enough for us to have something to believe in there?
I kind of had a difficult time accepting it, because if I'm comparing it, it's like I was going with what Jonesy was saying a minute ago, because if I'm comparing it to other examples that we have in canon, I'm having a hard time making it fit. Like, a very obvious one is even just thinking about the movies when Anakin is doing all these horrible things with his blue lightsaber, touching the dark side, the sand people, we have the kids. I mean, terrible, terrible atrocities. And the lightsaber didn't turn red during those. So I don't know. I'm kind of having a hard time making it fit, honestly.
What if we, and I'm not being an apologist here, but I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we get there? What if we say it's because the virgins on this planet, right? We've already talked about how force is amplified on this planet. That came out in the Leslie Headland interview. Could that be a reason why this was accelerated in some way? Was it an accelerant for her being able to bleed the crystal? Can you get on board with that?
I mean, I feel like...
Say no, it's okay.
I mean, I hate to like not have any give at all. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah, right.
Like I
nope,
like to be a little
like
flexible. Yeah. So I mean, I think I could get behind that. Maybe not like thrilled with it, but I think I could accept it enough to just move on.
Yeah.
And J-Knife in the chat was talking about, I think she was touching the crystal. The crystal was exposed in some way as well, and some of that was probably for visual aid. But I think also that could have been something that helped make contact with it to bridge that gap between. I'd have to go back and see if she actually had her finger on it, because again, I think the crystal it was only exposed to the top, maybe not through the side. But regardless, I think the feelings and everything that she had to have been feeling, I think they did a good enough job that all the reasons why, like when someone to explain what happened to you or what happened here, because they don't understand quite how this works. You could probably say, okay, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get all the things that she was hearing, and she's being really but they just didn't come out. They didn't exude in any kind of way. She was very quiet, like this quiet rage. And I'm not saying that's not okay to do. You don't have to have an outburst, but it was difficult for maybe people. I would have probably had a hard time understanding, like, well, okay, how exactly did she do this? Why does it, and to Lauren's part, like, how does it not happen all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then some of this, but it was still very much aligned with canon, though, which I did really like, is that it was from the lightsaber of a Jedi that she killed, and there was some sort of meaning associated with it.
Yeah.
And then all the pain that person actually caused went into bleeding that crystal. All of those fit wonderfully with canon, and actually the most ideal way that doesn't always happen. It didn't happen in the Vader comics that way, but it was very appropriated here, and is actually a better example of the most purest example of why you would bleed a crystal and how that would work.
Yeah. And the context too of the scene is after she's killed her parent, someone again she loved and looked up to. That is when now she stands up after Chimera comes and touches her, which she doesn't want anything to do with at that point, right? She's so emotional, is when she finally lashes out in pure anger. And that causes, that's kind of the final step for that crystal to bleed. So, again, visually really cool. I love the fact that we saw it. I totally get the criticism of, was it enough for us to kind of justify it being as simple or as easy? But nonetheless, it happened, and it was really neat to kind of finally see it. There's something really gross though about it being, it's always been canon that the crystal you bleed is from someone you killed. In her instance, it's her own freaking master. There's just something really gross and sick and perverse about that. But at the same time, and perfect. As I say, at the same time, it's kind of perfect. It's unfortunately one of those,
that's what I was trying to say. This is like this is the purest example of how this would normally work.
Yeah.
Is it a requirement that it has to be from someone you killed, or is it just ideal?
I think the instances we've seen, it's been someone they've killed, but I don't know if it's a hard requirement. Like, I don't know if there's ever been any like rule that says it has to be done.
Okay.
Osha was healing crystals, and I think later on, who was it? Someone else healed a crystal, but the crystals were being healed even though they weren't necessarily ones that they had, killed. I'm trying to think. Ahsoka's were. She took them from some of the what do you call them? Inquisitors, right? So there's been a precedence that's been the case, a trend that's been the case, but I don't know if there's ever actually been anything that said it has to be this. Unfortunately, you can't just go pick up another lightsaber and heal it or bleed it one way or the other. I don't necessarily think that's true, but.
Well, Luke purified a crystal as well in the comics, but I think the idea though is that it's a rite of passage for the Sith to bleed the crystal of someone that they killed. So that's the objective. That's what Soul gave us with Palpatine and Vader. That was the idea. All right, you have the lightsaber. He ignited it. Was still the color of the Jedi, and then he had to go on his quest to actually bleed it and be able to channel it in a certain way because it was very difficult. So that's kind of the disconnect here, I think. But it's supposed to be the one that you take the lightsaber of someone that you killed. Presumably, you'd have some connection to it, ideally, because then that would pour it into it even more. So again, that's kind of why this one fits really well.
In the comments, folks are talking about BJ Smith. Thanks for being here. Says, I heard someone say you had to bleed the crystal of a saber you took from the Jedi.
Correct.
Raphael says Ahsoka healed a crystal super fast.
Yeah, it was it was not even done in a sentence, or was it basically a sentence in the book, right?
And then One Up and Zor Allens both said in Jedi Survivor, Deegan just kind of waves magic fingers at it. And Deegan also bled the kyber crystal of his own Jedi lightsaber. It's
if you are a Patreon member, go watch or listen to our show where we did the Sith and the Skywalker. We talk about this in the comic book where Luke actually purifies a crystal and what goes into it. So if you are curious about that, it's in the comics from the Star Wars flagship comic from this year. We can get you the exact issue numbers, but you can do a quick search and find it. The Sith and the Skywalker. I believe it was like 2 or 3 issues, and then we did some coverage on that one too. That I recommend y'all go look up.
Yeah, I think we covered that part, and then we went back and kind of gave the context because it's 2 stories that are broken up by a number of issues, and maybe
there was a preamble. There was kind of a setup issue for it several before, and then the actual core of it all. Yeah.
Did he ever get with that girl?
No, I don't think so.
Never worked out. All right.
There's only one thing on Luke's mind, and it ain't action.
It's power converters,
and lightsaber crystals apparently.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm in love with the Force.
Good luck. Probably living with your parents still. No offense to anybody that lives with their parents. I'm just saying.
Or that's in love with the Force.
Okay, this is way off the rails.
Sorry, we're off the rails here. Okay. The Jedi finally show up. Vern heads out. She's got her little night group there, and this is where I was like, oh well, I guess that's a confirmation when she suddenly felt the presence of Kamir, and then he quickly put on that helmet. Very like he looks frightened, like he looks like, oh crap, she's here again, and I would be too if I had these like whip burns on the back of my back. I think there's a little bit of fear going on there around her.
Vernestra's like, you. Like, oh boy.
Oh boy.
Yep.
So
all those got confirmed real fast, didn't they?
All right. So let's talk quickly about Vernestra. And I want to go back to a question that I saw.
Well, hold on. We didn't go back to so on Soul.
Go ahead.
When he tells Osha that it's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Why is it okay to tell someone who's giving into the dark side to kill you in their rage and pain if it's not self-serving? Like, I need help. I need help getting there on this one. Yeah, it's dramatic. I get all of that. How does this actually work where Soul would be doing anyone a favor except for himself, though? This is one of the kind of the problem areas I had, or problem moments.
Well, I don't know that it was the best decision for him to make again.
Okay.
But I think he was looking at this from the perspective of, my God, she's suffering. She needs closure. She needs to feel like that justice has been served, not revenge, but justice has been served. And I am done here. Like, I am tired of living with this. It's gotten messy. More people are dead. And this is in the best interest of everybody around here. Just do it. Like, put me down, get it so that you can move on with your life. I think he was doing it for her, even though it doesn't really, from a character perspective, I can see where someone could make that choice, even if it doesn't sound rational. But I think that's really kind of where it came from. Does that help? Does that work?
I can get
50-50, you want to phone a friend?
No, that's fine. Lauren, is that kind of your perspective on that one too?
I'm
phoning a friend.
Also thought,
it's Lauren.
Yeah. I also thought maybe he's saying it's okay that you're upset. Maybe not it's okay that you're using the dark side, but it's okay that you're hurting, because that was kind of a issue for her, is she felt like she couldn't feel her grief. So maybe he's saying it's okay that you're grieving, it's okay that you're upset. Like,
I went darker. I was like, it's okay, you can kill me. Is that too dark?
Yeah, I guess that's another. I mean, yeah.
That's certainly a take.
Well,
I see why you're having a hard time with it, though, Jonesy. So
yeah, so I could probably get on board with the justice has been served angle of it, of saying you're right, enough is enough. It's okay. Let's close this chapter and like just wrap it. Let's just close it out, I guess. But still, it felt weird. It's not really. Yeah.
I mean, it's no different. I'm still struggling with Torben and why did he take his life?
No, that's absolutely fair. Yeah.
But,
it kind of, this felt a little bit like that, but it's still better than Torben's death. I still can't make heads or tails of Torben's death. Yeah.
I like this death better than Torben's. There's that.
That is absolutely true.
All right. Well, I was going to get into a conversation about Vernestra. It probably makes more sense to talk about it a little bit later towards the very end when she's kind of wrapping up and covering up a lot of things.
Yeah.
So this is where, Basil finds Mog, or Mog finds Basil. And of course, that's because we need him to be the tracker in just a few minutes here. But May and Osha retreat. They leave. They go through the tunnel. That tunnel looks a lot like the tunnel from a different angle from Empire Strikes Back again when they're walking through it. That was the explanation. She says she got sucked back in there. I forget what it was called. I don't know. That seemed kind of anticlimactic or dramatic, if you will. But I guess it is what it is. But somehow she made her way through that, and they finally make their way back to the tree of life, the virgins in the forest, whatever you want to call it. The Jedi head into the fortress. Vern finds Soul's body there. She starts hearing the voices. The psychometry stuff is like prevalent again. So I guess this is something she's developed over the years here, because she doesn't have that. And correct me if I'm wrong here. Keep me honest. I don't remember her ever having any of that ability during phase 1 or phase 3 of the High Republic. So
hasn't come out yet.
Yeah. But it's fine. It makes sense. It certainly does well for the story here. But she's hearing all the voices, right? She hears, "You should not have brought me here." She hears Coral's voice, Kelnaka's voice, and Dara saying, "Get the twins, get them out of here." When this was going on, I thought, well, maybe she's kind of hearing this and she really, truly is believing that Soul was responsible for this. But when you actually listen and watch the subtitles of what's being said, there's nothing in here that's like very, evidential that that's the case. So,
right.
Anyways, the Knights use Basil to find the girls, and Kamir finally shows up, and or he's sitting there kind of watching creepily Vern is down there, and she finally turns and whips around and sees him. So, and he kind of rushes off and disappears. A little magic trick again. So, all right, let's get to the tree. There's May and Osha reconcile their feelings here. One tells her, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I started the fire. They both break down. They start crying. There was some good emotion here. There was some good acting, I think, from Amanda Sember. I've been kind of neutral around her. I don't think she's really done amazing. I don't think she's been terrible by any means, but I felt like she did a pretty good job with some of the emotions that she was trying to convey. They go through the nursery rhyme. There was that question about who taught us the rhyme. And I wondered, I was like, oh my gosh, is there like some story that they're buried here? Some like, crazy theory or speculation as to why that nursery rhyme came up? Or were they just having fun about like, oh, I don't remember who created it. Was it you? Was it me? Oh, I don't know. We love each other kind of thing. What did you think, Jonesy? Tinfoil hat theory time?
Nah, I have a feeling it was probably just either Coral singing it too while they were, in her belly still, or they just, it had to come, it probably came from a parent though.
Okay.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, yeah, good. We'll move on from there then.
One of the mothers, yeah.
Yep. So Kamir finds him and says, hey, man, if I can find you, so can the Jedi. And Osha's plan is she wants to tell the Jedi what Soul did. Like, she feels like, hey, we just got to bring him forth in front of the tribunal, the Senate, whoever it is. They're going to believe it. The Jedi are going to believe us. And Kamir pushes back and, says, when they find out how powerful you are, think about what's going to happen. This was similar to what like Palpatine was telling Anakin, right? They're jealous of how powerful you are. He's still playing into that dark side kind of motive and the will there. So, and then May kind of steps in and says, you will meet the same fate as our mother. I thought, what is she like flexing here for? I guess she's suddenly saying that, look, you're going to meet the same fate. I mean, and I'm asking a sincere question because I didn't understand where this was coming from. It felt out of place, but she was telling Kamir that he would meet the same fate as her mother, which is death. So were they going to turn on him, or did I interpret that scene wrong?
I thought May was talking about Osha.
I thought so too.
Oh, well, yeah, then I got the whole scene wrong, and that's fine.
Yeah. I think it makes more sense with Osha.
That makes way more sense. Okay.
Right.
Well, she's like looking off to him, but.
Right, because if they take the twins, or for lack of a better word, the twins, it's just it's a lab experiment then of trying to experience what they're doing, and they'll feel threatened by them. And now that she's gone dark, it seems like this is not a good scenario to go and present yourself to the most powerful body in the galaxy with the Jedi, and
right. They're just going to kill you.
These weird circumstances. And whether they kill them or not, maybe that seems a bit extreme, but they have no reason to believe otherwise because that's what they've seen with the Jedi.
Right.
Although Osha probably knows a little bit better than that, but. Again, these extreme things, this virgins they don't understand, all those things you start adding up, and it's a risk you'd have to weigh. And I'm kind of with them. I think at this point you don't trust any of the Jedi to be able to do the right thing because they continue to show you that they're just not capable or they're just unwilling in some of these cases.
I mean, they did all like kill a bunch of people, so I mean, if the Jedi punished them, I feel like it's kind of like, I mean, they probably deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they've earned it. May tells Osha that she asks her, "What do you want to do?" And they come up with this plan of like, well, Kamir will wipe their memory so that she can't trace May back to Osha and Osha to May kind of thing. And she says, "You're going to do what you were meant to do, and I won't stop you this time." How did you guys interpret that? Like, what was it she was talking about? Was it like? She's not becoming a Jedi, which is what she wanted to do. Was it just getting in tune with the Force? This is where I had some honest, again, more sincere head scratching here about what exactly the motive was or what they were wanting.
You want to take a shot at it, Lauren?
I feel like I'm on like a game show.
Were there no right answers or what?
Yeah, like, because I mean, there's a lot of aspects about this scene that I was kind of not understanding. So, I mean, maybe it's just the fact that Osha has lived so much of her life not doing what she really wanted to do deep down.
It's a more generalized statement than.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, but that's just me taking a stab at it because some of this stuff, when I was trying to piece it together, I mean, I'm also scratching my head. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, if nobody has any strong thoughts or opinions, we can move on. But
well, I mean, I think it helps if you look at it simply. I think so. I think Kamir was just erasing May's memory. I don't think he touched Osha's. I didn't get that impression at all. I think she actually remembered things because he didn't want to erase anything with her, right? Because she finally
Yeah,
got to this point.
that was clear.
And then I think with May, I think I think you were on the right path of, OSHA has always had this. She's limited herself. She's held herself back. It wasn't a popular decision. It kind of ruined her family to make this decision with the Jedi, and all of that still lasted with her for her entire life. That she ended up flunking out effectively or feeling like she failed, and left. And now she's finally embraced something, and she's made the choice herself. And May is telling her now, I'm not going to get in the way of your choice. It really is your choice, to use the episode title from last week, to make this call. Like, your destiny is your own. If you want to pull the thread of fate, then do it. If you want to pull the thread, then do it. And she is finally capable, and also no one's going to stand in her way to be able to do it. And the only person that she'll have to answer to for how it goes and how it turns out will be herself. And so I think May is just kind of accepting and giving, it's almost like giving permission to an extent of, or just being very open, like, hey, you didn't get to make your own choice before. This is your opportunity. You make it, just like what Mother Anastasia was trying to tell her too. So May's finally kind of adopting her Mother Anastasia's perspective on this, rather than Coral's more dictatorship of, this is what you should want, this is what you should do, this is what you will do, and more Anastasia's approach of saying, I can't interfere with free will, and make your choice and live with the decision.
Yeah. No, I can see that. That, again, more of a general, this is destiny versus choice, and this is your choice, and you've never really had an opportunity to do that, and so
exactly,
I'm not going to get in the way of that again. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I get that. They go ahead and shake on the deal. I guess Kamir and OSHA, which is, they touch hands, which is sex in Star Wars. So
no, they struck
glad
lightsabers.
they finally did it.
He handed her back the lightsaber. That was the agreement. And then he stroked her thumb.
Yeah, he stroked her thumb. Come on.
But he handed the lightsaber. That was the deal. We shake on lightsabers now.
Yeah, that's part of it.
She touched his lightsaber.
So the girls, they end up hugging it out. They start crying. OSHA says that she will find May. She says, I know you will. Foreshadowing them potentially there for season 2. It sounds like they're going to reunite. That'll be interesting. Right. And while they're doing that and they're starting to do the little nursery rhyme thing, like, Kamir's like, we got to get this show on the road. He just starts to wipe. Doesn't even ask them. He just starts wiping the memory. We got to get out of here.
May nodded at him to start.
Did she? Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, she looked at him and kind of nodded, and that's when he started.
They were also kind of in a hurry, so it makes sense.
We got to get the show on the road, ladies.
May
let's go.
and Kamir are like, let's go ahead.
Let's go.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's her. It's all her. I don't know what to do.
She's not hurrying up.
She's not hurrying up. She's a hugger. What do you want me to do? But eventually the Jedi show up. May's there, and of course she doesn't remember anything. They take her back to Coruscant, and this is where they turn Pip off. I don't know. Well, I guess that's the end of him. And Vern starts talking to her, trying to get her to kind of tell her, what do you remember? And it's very clear she doesn't. It looks like he's wiped everything. At least they're not everything. Well, I don't know. We don't necessarily get in. We don't need to get into it in this episode. There is a question about how much did he wipe? Like, was it just the memories of them, kind of like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind thing, if you've ever seen that movie, or was it like everything after that? Because like that seems quite severe, but I'm going to guess it was just those memories and moments, whenever she interacted with May, OSHA, or anytime she ever interacted with Kamir at that point.
She seemed surprised to hear that she had a sister at all. So
right, yeah. I mean, she talks about that she, somebody, a man killed my mother. She ran away. She needs to tell someone, but she can't find her. Like, never mentions anything about a sister until it's Vernestra Rowe brings it up. And then she talks about Saul. This was really heartbreaking. Talked about him being a kind, brilliant, compassionate man, that he was her friend, and he did a terrible thing. And then we cut over. This is a nice little transition. I like the way that the writing was here, where they kind of wrapped things up. Even though I don't necessarily agree with how it ended or liked how it ended, it is what it is. But I did like the way it was all kind of put together and stitched together, where we were having these different transitions. And then we even had one scene where we cut back to where she's burned Saul's body out there on Brendock, I assume. But she says 16 years ago, 4 Jedi were stationed on planet Brendock. They discovered a forced cult of witches. A conflict ensued. There were many casualties. Afterwards, the Jedi conspired to keep their actions secret. Recently, when the truth threatened to come out, a rogue Jedi named Saul killed his accomplices to maintain the cover story. Speaking on behalf of the High Council, we wholly condemn the actions of Master Saul. I can assure you while this is a terrible tragedy, it was the work of one flawed man. That was very difficult, and that's broken up over a couple of different scenes. But again, as a person that really enjoyed Saul's character, to see him destroyed by her again as part of a cover up, Vern is like, it's hard. And I want to get into the discussion now. I forget now who, somebody asked the question earlier, like, how do we feel about her portrayal of her character? We talked, a lot of time has passed, 100 years has passed. And so is it that difficult for us to get around or to wrap our heads around that she's really has changed? We don't know all of the circumstances that have kind of driven her to this character, but she is now somebody who is doing, like Lauren said, repeating the same bad behaviors that got everybody into the situation to begin with. And it is very uncharacteristic of her, I think, given where she is, even in phase 3, like right now, or we are in phase 3, this does seem out of character. So it's very difficult to struggle with it. It's hard to accept it from not only Saul's perspective, because again, he's being run through the mud here, but then just really Vern and like, you know, how desperate she is to ensure that nobody does find out about this and cover up the way she is. So Lauren, I'm going to throw this at you just because I know you've got some thoughts here on Vern's character.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to watch. I agree with you. I was also bummed out when she seemed like she was avoidant of going into hyperspace because of the visions, because I was kind of like, I would have expected her to be like, bring on the visions. Like, I'm going to interpret them. You know what I mean? So even that was hard for me. So seeing this, it was difficult. I appreciated that her doing this was in line with what the season had set up previously. So it was hard for me to be mad at it because it is what the story was telling us it was going to do pretty much. So I did like that it was like a very fitting end, but I agree that it is difficult that it's Vernestra that's doing it, considering how she's been set up in the books. The way that I rationalize that to myself is that a lot can happen in 100 years. I mean, there's no telling what she's been through since, I mean, because in the High Republic books, she's very young. So there's no telling what she's been through. So it could have made her very callous and very just kind of like, I'm going to do what I need to do for what she believes is the greater good. So, I mean, it kind of sucks, but I could see it happening.
Yeah. What about you, Jonesy? You think, and here's a question. Knowing how much we know Justina Ireland loves this character, do you think they ever ran it past her and said, hey, we're about to do something to your character. Are you okay with this? Do you think she had a say in it? Do you think she would have checked them? And then I guess overall, how do you like the portrayal?
You know, it's tough. I mean, it's like it's on the same wavelength as like Luke Skywalker when we get to Force Awakens and Last Jedi, right? Of a character that's beloved and by a group of fans that when we see them behave in a different way, it's really difficult for us to get our arms around it. And you guys are both right. I mean, it's been 100 years, and 100 years is a long time. A lot of things happen. And earlier in the show, I mentioned, like, this is when the light of the Jedi, pun intended, or, quote intended, of Charles Soule book really does feel like we have finally pivoted, and that light is now fading. The Jedi are closing ranks. They're starting to keep things in-house, maybe even keep things from each other. There's been a fundamental shift here in what they're doing, especially as they start to have more prying eyes, and they don't feel like they can be as transparent with the Republic and those in their ranks and those around them. So it feels like a fundamental shift. But man, this is really hard to watch because, I mean, we know Vernestra from the books, and she's such a bright spot in many of those books and what she brings to the table. And even when she has difficult times, she finds ways around them. And it's really strange to see this and to know that she left a scar on Chimere, because that all but confirms that the scar is from her light whip, right? And those are things that, there's going to be a story there, and it's probably not going to be as bad as it might seem in our imagination right now, but it's just not painting her in a very good light. And her intentions are probably, I hate to say good, because this doesn't feel like a good situation at all, but there's probably a path you can understand at least why she's choosing to do these types of things.
Right, how she's rationalizing this,
Yeah, she's found a way to rationalize it. And I think the real question is, and we've had some folks in the chat ask this, and I believe you probably had it here in the notes, is how much is she going to tell Yoda?
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
That's the real question, is how transparent is this going to be? Is she going to bring the Grand Master in? Is she going to get guidance, or is it going to be cryptic? Or are we going to start painting Yoda in a similar way too, which would really have some really powerful connotations to go along with that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to jump ahead.
We
but
don't want
since-
to cross that bridge quite yet because we just don't know. But I mean, that's one that'd be difficult. Yeah, because it's already difficult enough with Vernestra, a character we just know from the literature, right? Not even from movies and everything, but it could start to have the same type of the types of emotions it'll elicit will be similar to what we had with Luke. Of not really sure how we feel about this turn of events.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to get into like Greek tragedy territory with some of these characters and the deconstruction of them. One Up versus CPU says it's too late for Yoda. He's got some skeletons in the closet during the High Republic already. We've seen that.
Maybe he's learned from it. By this
Jackknife,
time.
maybe, yeah. Jackknife says two green liars conversing. But Raphael brings up a point that I think we're kind of just speaking to. Like, I think it's probably too early. It's easy for us to judge Vern right now, and I think it's absolutely fair for us to judge Vern on what she's done. What we don't know is that last post credits, but not really post credit scene where we see Yoda's head. We don't know what she's going to go in there. She could very well go in and be absolutely transparent about everything and allow Yoda to make a decision about it. And maybe and one of two things is going to happen if that does turn out to be the case. He's either going to say, let's continue to cover this up. You made the right choice, right? Or let's figure out a way to kind of expose this at the same time, not bringing us down kind of thing. I don't know what season 2 would look like if they went down that path, because it's really, really messy at this point. And that seems like it could consume a lot of what a potential season 2 would even look like. But yeah, I think it's probably too early to know exactly what because to Raphael's point, there is a moment in Defy the Storm where Vern she's basically telling Ezra, look, you need to go to the council. You need to confess your sins. And he ultimately does. We can talk about temptation of the Force. He ultimately does. He goes and tells them, look, I did these horrible things. And they're like, hey, yeah, we all do, right? We all do terrible things, and we still want to make you, a Jedi, give you a seat on the council.
Yeah, it's
and
because
if that
of
guy
those
can
things
come
you
back,
should have a seat. Yeah, it's almost like a criteria.
right?
Yeah.
And if that guy can come back from all the things he's done,
that was an interesting.
It was
I didn't know
interesting
I didn't know how I
response
felt
from him.
about that either. Yeah.
So there's hope for all of us, I guess, at this point.
So I have a question for y'all
yeah.
around Vernestra when she's talking to the tribunal. Do you really think she spoke with the authority of the council?
No, I don't think so. I don't think because that final scene, that was her first touch point with the High Council. And it wasn't the whole High Council. It was somebody that she's known for a very long time that she could have a very personal one-on-one contact with and say, look, I want to talk to you about this. I don't want to bring this to Jedi Council. If you want me to bring it to the council, I will, but I want your opinion one-on-one. Vern talking to Yoda, Yoda talking to Vern kind of thing. I think what she did with the tribunal is she compartmentalized. She said she still, if you think about it, she said she had all the authority to act so long as there wasn't like an existential threat or some like global threat kind of thing. She downplayed that, but under that guise, she made the decision that she could have that kind of council, that kind of meeting without the exposure or the insight coming in from the High Council in any way. I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Yeah,
Agreed?
I second that. Yeah.
All right. She says there was that nice little touching moment where he's laying there and she says, I'm sorry, my friend. I couldn't tell if it was like, I'm sorry you died or I'm sorry I'm about to bury you.
It's
Number 2.
I'm
yeah,
about to-
I'm sorry. I'm about to throw you under the bus.
Yeah.
You know that character? I'm just going to assassinate it now.
Yeah. More bodies are going to be laid to rest here.
Thank you for your sacrifice.
Yeah. Thank you for your sacrifice and your duty.
It was actually, I was almost expecting her to say thank you in some ways of giving me an out, but she already started setting that one up several episodes ago.
Yeah. But she does say to the tribunal that Saul made a mistake he lived with for so long. It twisted his mind. He justified every selfish step with the love he had for his sister. Now, there's a lot of holes. We're not going to do it now because we're already coming up on the 2-hour mark. There are a lot of holes you can poke in this, especially with a number of people that still know that something was going on. Kira Mundi, some of the other characters that we saw, some of the other Jedi that were brought into this initially, they all know something happened. So what does that cover look like? Can you really hide this? Even with what she did, I've got questions about whether that's going to be enough. And that might be part of the narrative. It could be that she thinks she's doing everything and this is going to get exposed somewhere, later down the road. So I don't want to say that's not a possibility. She gets into more conversations with May, mentions her sister. She's like, I have a sister. I didn't know I did. And she says, the Jedi have failed you. But she says she's going to make things right. If you look at a post that Rebecca, what's her last name? Rebecca
Henderson.
Henderson, yes. Rebecca Henderson posted something on social media, I think today, saying that Vern made the best decision she could with the data that she had, but she will, and she put like emphatically said, she will try to make things right. So that was confirmation for me that, okay, this is still a good person making bad choices, right? Maybe depending on what she does with Yoda, but at the same time, it does sound like there is a plan if we do get a season 2, or maybe in a book or some other storytelling apparatus or forum, we will get to know kind of how she does try to, right the ship in some ways. All right. The last part is Osha and Kamir having more sex on the beach.
Oh my God.
And this
AKA
is
touching hands.
touching hands. The violins are playing. They're kind of watching the sunset. I don't know why people hate this scene. It's like, we've seen this so many times in Star Wars. People just stand and they stare off. It's Star Wars. They've done it so many times, but
we're not legit shipping these two, are y'all?
Yes.
I'm not. I'm
Thank
not.
you.
No, I think,
Thank you.
well,
Lauren's
hold
the
on.
voice of reason here.
Time out. They've already said this is where they're going. That's already, that's official.
But
Osha, but we don't have to like it.
Well, Chimera wants it, but does Osha really want it? Osha's not really giving in to
She
any of
seems
this.
like she does not respect him at all. So I don't know if she actually
Have you
likes him
seen his
very
biceps? Have you seen his biceps?
But
Come on.
she's
yeah,
not
but it
been
takes a little
receptive.
bit more than that.
I know. I'm kidding. I'm joking. I think this is where I want it to go. I want it to go there because I think it's a very interesting. I think I brought this up back in episode 6. I think it's a very interesting take, and we've seen it happen in Legends. Darth Treya, a couple other Sith Lords, but there's a very different dynamic and a very strong connection to the Force when you have two dark side users that are in love. Really bad things can happen. Some very powerful things can happen, and I want to see it explored, like on screen. That's really where my interest is. It's not I just want to ship two people, but it's a dynamic of the Force where it feeds into emotions tenfold, and I want to see what that looks like and manifests as far as the power goes.
I mean, I do think that sounds interesting. My issue is that I'm not sold on the romance. I haven't seen any reason as to why they would be compelled to touch hands. Like I haven't seen those story beats that I need to see to buy a romance yet.
Yeah.
It's all Chimera. He's the only one actually doing it. Like he's the one that hands the lightsaber and then touches her thumb, right, and then strokes it. When he reaches over and takes her hand, he's the one taking it. She doesn't respond in any kind of other reciprocal kind of way. So that's why I was curious, because it seems it seems to be just in one direction. Osha might be a little bit dead inside right now, or not really focused on all of the physical pleasures of life or whatever, but it just doesn't seem like she's interested in that way that we're seeing right now.
Okay, but would she though? Would you expect a character who's gone through what she's gone through in the last day or two, these events, to suddenly be like, oh yeah, I'm down with the relationship? She's not going to be, but I think it's Kamir saying, look, when you're ready, I'm here. And I think what they did in that episode when he derobed, I think they did enough for me in that scene where, like, okay, she is interested, even though this is not something she necessarily wants right now. They planted that seed. And so he's just reminding her, if and when you're ready, I'm your man. I'm your boy.
For me, it just comes back to my issue of what does this guy want? Because I feel like his behavior with May was so different. And I don't mean like he has to be interested in May too, but I just mean like it was just a completely different dynamic. It was much more, I feel like, a traditional Sith relationship that we would expect to see based on what we already have.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
there's been such a shift with Osha where it's like she openly just disrespects him. She doesn't seem afraid of him, like none of that. And he seems like he's just cool with it. So I'm just like, what is it? What kind of relationship with an apprentice is he actually looking for here? Because it seems like he's just trying out different ones.
Yeah.
So.
Let's see. There's a lot. I guess we hit a nerve here. Let's see. On the relationship topic, I'm going to start with the first one. One Up says Leslie Headland totally wanted to make that connection. And then later on, he says, that's what I thought too, but Hedlund acts like it's so obvious. She literally said it's obvious. Like, what? Like, is it really that obvious? I think that's where you're coming from, both of you, I think, especially Lauren. Jenny says, lust and love can be very powerful. There's Steph. Well, I'm happy to ship them. So, shocker that Steph is there with it.
Right.
She did put the stank helmet on. Thank you.
It's got to be pretty ripe
in
in there, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right. We got more questions in here. We'll have to table some of these because we're really over on time. But it finally ends with, again, the post-credit scene that wasn't a post-credit scene. And
it's a pre-credit. It's a pre-credit scene.
Pre-credit scene.
It's actually what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it looked like it ended like not every, but most Star Wars movies or scenes end with two people standing off in the distance. Music kind of crescendos, drops. We fade to black, and you're like, oh, now roll credits. But because we never have done a post-credit scene, no.
Correct.
Did we have something in Mando? I'm forgetting now.
We had something. Yeah.
He had something in Mando. Either way,
we won't really do it though, right?
Yeah. But this scene was fine. It certainly alludes to a season 2. I've been saying, and I've been hearing from sources that season 2 was just it was a formality ever since the premiere came out. Like right after that, there were already talks about doing a season 2. And I know people are saying, look, they're going to wait for the numbers. I totally get all that. But the way this was written, and it sounds like there was a lot of intent here, unless there was like some crazy circumstance where they absolutely do not want to make a season 2. They've done enough as far as what trends have shown us with Disney to give them at least a season 2. I can't say that about a season 3, but I do feel like a season 2, it's probably inevitable at this point. By the way, tomorrow, and I want you guys' final thoughts here, but tomorrow, Maggie Lovett, personal friend of ours, she's been on the show before. She hosted the show with us for a few episodes. She's now one of the she just got a new title change, but she's over at Collider. She has an exclusive interview tomorrow. Was it June or July 18th? That's going to be with Leslie Headland. And so I'm hoping that we get more answers, and maybe they're going to hint at a potential season 2. But if you're not following her on social media, or please do so, head out to the Collider website tomorrow. I think it's supposed to drop around 10 Central ish. But that should be a very interesting. I think that's going to be her first post series interview, and should be, hopefully there's going to be some stuff shared there. But Jonesy, I guess any final thoughts around anything that we just wrapped up here, or kind of about the episode itself?
Well, I think with season 2, I think some of that's going to come down to how well it performed. How do they think they can continue to spend the kind of money they spent on this series? Because a lot of this is going to come down to how much they want to spend. Yeah, we want to do season 2. What's the right budget look like based on what the return was? Not to take it out of Star Wars and take the fun out of it, but these are the real life decisions that these folks have to make. Not just because, hey, we ended with a lot of cliffhangers. Clearly, we have to go do it. No, the dollars have to make sense, so to speak, right? So that part still has to be there. The fans still have to come out. There is a wild contingency that loves this series, so there is demand for it. The real question will be, is there enough demand? So that's the thing we'll come back to. But I think, for the episode, and we'll talk about the series as a whole more this weekend and in the coming weeks. But I think for the episode, again, kind of recap, I think much of it kind of stuck where they were headed. They did deliver several of the things that they needed to, and I think much of it was actually pretty good. And more hits than misses, I think, overall. There's definite moments, I think, that kind of plagued this series in general that were still present in here of like, well, why did they do that? Did they do enough? Some of that. But I think for the things they needed to deliver on, the things they needed to close out, they did. Is it the story? Did it end the story that I thought maybe we were beginning? Not really, but it did end the story that I think they wanted to tell us. And so I think that part was at least satisfying in that regard. And they did leave it into a position that you are curious about what comes next and where does it go. A lot of concerns about like the Jedi. Are we being a little premature with how we're going to tear them apart and tear them down? It feels like we're a little early on some of that, but that's also the era that we're getting into. So we have to get comfortable for some of that. Actually, I was talking to Mike Rondo a little bit about this earlier, and he was like, I'm wondering if they should have maybe done this episode even earlier, maybe in the High Republic era, to really establish how good the Jedi really are in this era, or at least the era coming into this, to help people understand. So you have you get a bit of the balance. Yeah, we have the books, but maybe show this as well, so you can actually see the difference in the Jedi over this period of time, rather than it feels like we just get more Jedi, like we're just crapping on Jedi all the time, which has been something we've talked about off and on for the last few years now about the commentary. Because again, we keep residing within these phases and these eras where the Jedi are on the decline. So, but anyway, enough about that. But overall, pretty solid episode, kind of a 7 out of 10 in my book, I think. And, you know, I think they probably did enough to secure a season 2, but we'll have to see what the numbers look like.
Yeah. If we're giving ratings, I think I have it about a 7.5, maybe an 8. It probably will grow on me, I think, over time. But, you know, less than 24 hours later, I'm probably sitting around the same way with you. Lauren, what about you? Final thoughts on the episode? And then I guess if you want to give a numeric rating, where would you throw it?
Numeric rating is difficult because honestly, I mean, I feel like the direction that the story took, it's just not my personal taste. Like, it's just not what I personally would have wanted. But the way that they wrapped it up and some of the questions that they answered, I mean, especially with the note that they left it on with Vernestra, I think that that was true to the theme that they had established. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. A lot of mixed emotions for me because I went into the series thinking it was going to be, I mean, I feel like I was kind of on a roller coaster of what I thought it was going to be based on different pieces of information.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really end on the note that I really wanted, so I don't know. It's a weird one for me, honestly.
Yeah, I think we'll get into some of this on our kind of roundtable discussion on Sunday, and I think over the course of the next few weeks as we kind of do our show wrap-ups, there's a lot of stuff that we want to talk about and discuss, both on the public shows and the Patreon shows. I think we'll probably work through a lot of that and probably land on a more firm number or more firm opinion about how we feel about the series itself. I'm with you. Like right now, it does feel like there were highs and lows. The highs were really high. The lows were probably just mediums. Like there wasn't anything that was really egregious. I think there was some decisions again that were made with the characters. There's definitely some holes you can poke in some of this stuff. But I mean, again, we've talked about this so many times. You can poke holes in pretty much everything, even the stuff that Lucas came out with. So I want to see a season 2. Like I definitely want to see season 2. I think they've earned it at least from my opinion. I think they've earned a season 2 at this point. So I really hope they go through with that. And I think it could be interesting. You make a good point about the budget, Jonesy. I don't know where that's going to land. There's been a lot of discussion, and honestly, Disney has been absolutely like quiet. They usually are. Like they won't necessarily come out publicly like this and say, "Oh, we spend too much." No, they're not going to say that. What we hear is in the investor calls, it's laced in there some way, right? And you can kind of interpret and decode what they're talking about. And that's likely, if we're going to get anything about the budget, is when we'll hear that, where we'll actually see something like that. So, hey, just I'm going to throw this up there. This shirt, by the way, this is we don't get anything for this, but rebelscumapparel.com. Go check him out. He supports the show. He's got a lot of great shirts out there. Thank you for noticing it. All right.
And something I noticed for all the amazing people on the live stream, Albert. Yeah, so again, cantidacast.com/YouTube. If you'd like to come out and join us on the live stream again, we'll be live again this Sunday at 8 p.m. Central. So a little bit earlier than usual because we're going to have a 5-hour show for 5 people, 1 hour each. But special thanks to Music Train.
I hope there's a bathroom break.
Well, we'll negotiate.
Just turn your camera off and go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Special thanks to Music Train, Sky, Alex, Jackknife, Chris Jovanovic, Danny K, One Over CP, Raphael, Trent, Katya, Zeralin, Steph, Jenny, Matthew, Coops, Jay Price, My Star Wars Guys, Vlad, BJ. If I missed anyone, my sincerest apologies, not intentional. Zeralin, send us an email so we can get you your poster. We'd love to hear from you. Congratulations again. And everyone, get your questions in so you can win the High Republic, the Art of the High Republic book from Kristen Baver. Albert's got that in hand, so as soon as we get a winner out, we'll get that out in the mail very soon afterwards. He's got it up on camera. It is a glorious book. It is at the same high standard of all of the other art of books in the Star Wars line that they've been doing for years and years. They are absolutely fantastic. You're going to want a shot at that one. Like, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and then of course leave us a question, and that automatically enters you in. You don't have to pay. You don't have to do anything like that. Just leave us some engagement. That's all we're looking for.
Jackknife says, and thank you, Lauren, for your recaps and reviews. They help me so much.
Yay! You're welcome. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. All right, guys, we'll end it there. Come back Sunday. Make some time. Sunday night, 8 p.m., an hour early than we normally do. We'll have all 5 of us on air for the first time ever. We've never had everybody on here, but we've got a lot of fun questions, a lot of great discussion to kind of focus around the Acolyte, and so you don't want to miss that. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you all here in just a few days.
still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.